Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
A routine morning, a single message suddenly, my world caved in. Everyone believed we had the perfect marriage, until one moment tore us apart. Fear and rage consumed me when I uncovered her hidden life. Even now, my heart pounds recalling that neon-lit night, her eyes on another man. Strangers whispered, confidants vanished, leaving me alone on the edge of a broken vow. Anger burned deep, fueling a plan no one saw coming, secrets unraveled, demanding a price too steep to ignore. This is my story, and it may shatter your every certainty. In the midst of chaos, I rose, turning betrayal into my fiercest weapon. Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. I woke up later than usual that Thursday morning. The digital clock by the bedside glowed with a time that made me groan, and I realized Fiona hadn't called me down for coffee like she normally did. She'd been getting up ahead of me all week, which was slightly odd for someone who loved to sleep in. I shrugged it off, telling myself I just needed to adjust to her new morning routine. Perhaps she had changed up her gym schedule, or maybe she was trying out some new health kick. We'd been married 5 years, but even after so long, people can surprise you with new habits. By the time I got to the kitchen, Fiona was already halfway through a cup of green tea, her phone in her hand. She wore this contented, far-away expression that bothered me for reasons I couldn't name yet. She looked up when she noticed me enter, quickly flipping her phone screen face down on the table. I caught a faint grin on her lips, but then she offered me her usual morning smile, so I pushed away whatever niggling suspicion was at the back of my mind. "Morning, Andrew," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Morning," I replied, rummaging in the cupboard for cereal. "You're up early again. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Fiona answered, taking a tiny sip of her tea. "I've just been excited for that high school reunion. It's next Friday. You remember, right?" I did remember. She'd brought it up repeatedly over the past few weeks. Initially, I thought it was sweet Fiona reconnecting with old classmates. But the more she talked about it, the more I noticed a slight distance in her tone whenever she mentioned the event. She'd smile to herself, almost as if reliving private memories I knew nothing about. The mention of the reunion usually came with a dreamy look, or with a few cryptic texts arriving on her phone. "Yeah, sure," I said, pouring cereal into a bowl and trying not to sound suspicious. "I'm still planning to go with you." She nodded. "You'll know some people there. Ethan and Harriet Gray, for instance. You like them, right?" I considered Harriet and Ethan. They'd always been friendly enough, though I'd never felt super close to them. Harriet and Fiona had grown up on the same block, while Ethan was Fiona's friend from high school. He used to joke that he knew all her secrets, but of course he never spilled them around me. I'd just assumed it was harmless nostalgia. As I munched my cereal, Fiona stood up, grabbed her phone, and stepped away. She tapped the screen a few times, paused, then looked over her shoulder. When she caught me watching, her gaze flickered. "I'm texting Harriet," she said almost too quickly. "We're comparing notes on what to wear." I flashed a polite smile, but my heart felt an uncomfortable pinch. For a moment, I wondered if Harriet was the only person she was texting. My phone vibrated with a work notification, so I forced myself to leave the topic alone. I needed to head to the office soon anyway. My biggest client had an important audit that demanded focus. In the living room, I found my laptop bag, then slipped on my jacket. Normally, Fiona would walk with me to the door, pressing a playful kiss to my cheek. Today, she remained by the kitchen table. Her phone was back in her hand, her posture tense as she read something on the screen. I bit the inside of my cheek, deciding not to stir up a fight over what might be nothing. We all have private matters, I told myself. "Guess I'll see you tonight," I said. "Don't forget we have that dinner with James Parker this weekend." She waved vaguely without turning around. "Right. I'll keep it in mind." On the drive to my accounting firm, I tried to shake off the weird vibe. I told myself I might be overthinking. Marriage ruts happened. People got consumed by random fixations like this reunion. Fiona had never given me a real reason to distrust her. Still, that moment when she flipped her phone over so hastily it replayed in my mind. At the office, I parked in my usual spot behind the building. Once inside, I was greeted by the rhythmic hum of printers and low murmur of conversation. My colleague and friend, James Parker, gave me a wave from across the open workspace. He'd already set a coffee on my desk, a thoughtful gesture he did whenever he noticed I arrived looking tired. James was a couple of years younger than I was, easygoing but incredibly sharp with numbers. "Late night?" he asked casually. "Sort of," I replied, powering up my computer. "Just had stuff on my mind?" James nodded, not pressing for details. He was the type who'd listen if I needed to vent, but never pried. I liked that about him. It was a quality that made him a good co-worker. My phone buzzed, drawing my attention. Fiona had sent me a brief message. "Hope your day goes well. Don't forget to pick up the dry cleaning if you can." An odd sense of relief settled in me. At least she still cared to text me. Maybe I was just being paranoid earlier. I typed a quick reply, then turned my focus to the audit on my screen. A client named Strandwell Tech was dealing with a backlog of unfiled returns, messy financial statements, and a potential inquiry by the IRS. Not exactly small stuff. My job was to make sense of the chaos and keep them compliant. The hours drifted by in a haze of spreadsheets, phone calls, and quiet frustration at Strandwell's outdated records. Around noon, James poked his head into my office. "Let's grab lunch," he said. "You look like you're about to strangle your computer." We ended up at a small sandwich shop down the block. Between bites of turkey on rye, James brought up next month's major contract negotiations. But I couldn't help letting my mind wander back to that phone call Fiona had brushed off. Something about the way she changed the topic, or maybe the quick glances at her phone, was making me uneasy. "You good?" James asked, noticing my silence. "Yeah," I managed. "Just stuff at home. Probably nothing." He nodded, but I caught the flicker of concern on his face. James was perceptive enough to see I wasn't telling the full story. I told myself I'd open up if it got worse. No point dragging him into my marriage worries when I didn't even know if they were real. That evening, I reached home to find a bright red dress bag hanging on the outside of Fiona's closet. She was in the living room, flipping through TV channels, a wide grin on her face. "New outfit?" I asked. She beamed. "Yeah, Harriet said I needed something bold. It's not just a simple dinner. You know there's going to be dancing, a photo booth, the works." I took a seat beside her, trying to mask my slight discomfort. "Sounds like quite a party." Fiona leaned closer, showing me an online flyer on her phone. It depicted a flashy venue, disco lights, and an invitation for all old classmates to gather. She seemed more excited than I'd seen her in months. Part of me wanted to share that excitement. After all, shouldn't I be glad she was happy? "So they're calling it a reunion bash instead of a typical reunion," she went on, scrolling through the details. "Ethan and Harriet are helping organize. Damon Price is too, apparently. He was one of my old friends." The name Damon Price barely registered in my head. It sounded vaguely familiar. Maybe Fiona had mentioned him once or twice. I tried not to stare too hard as she spoke it with that subtle shift in her voice. "Interesting," I said, keeping my tone light. "Well, I'll be there with you. Might be fun." She nodded but didn't meet my eyes. "Yeah, sure," she murmured. Then she stood abruptly. "I'm going to try on this dress. Let me know what you think." While she was gone, I found myself gripping the TV remote tightly. I flipped through channels, aimlessly watching commercials about cars and insurance policies, my mind only half registering the blur of images. There was a heaviness in my chest that felt entirely out of place for a simple night at home. When Fiona emerged, she looked stunning in that red dress, confident, radiant, and maybe a little too eager. She asked for my opinion, spinning around, letting the fabric catch the soft glow of the living room lamp. I told her she looked beautiful, and she did. But for reasons I couldn't explain, a thread of dread curled in my stomach, warning me that something about all this was off. "Do you like it?" she repeated, a slight edge in her tone, as if my approval suddenly mattered more than usual. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "You'll stand out for sure." She didn't respond immediately. The tension in the room felt palpable, like we were both caught in a slow-motion scene neither of us could name. Finally, she slipped back into the bedroom, changed into pajamas, and returned with a forced, casual vibe, as if nothing weird had happened. We spent the rest of the evening watching a crime drama on Netflix, making only minimal conversation. Later that night, lying in bed, I noticed Fiona scrolling through her phone again. Her face glowed from the screen's light. I turned onto my side, mind racing. I had never been the paranoid type, but each subtle clue was starting to stack up. She had seemed so distant in the morning, so secretive with her phone. Now her excitement about the reunion was overshadowed by how guarded she was acting around me. I didn't have the heart to ask about it yet. Confrontation might turn a small seed of distrust into a wildfire. Besides, maybe this was just an overblown fear on my part. People change. They develop new interests. Reconnect with old friends. That doesn't always mean something sinister is happening. But a small voice in my head whispered that I needed to keep my eyes open just in case. I closed my eyes, letting the TV's faint chatter lull me toward sleep. My last thought before dozing off was that I'd soon find out if my suspicions were warranted or if I was simply letting my imagination run wild. The next morning began with heavy rain drumming against the windows. I found Fiona in the kitchen, reading an article on her tablet. She wore a slight scowl, the kind she usually reserved for news about politics or local drama. But this time I could tell it was something personal. As I approached, she locked the tablet and pushed it aside, forcing a cheerful expression. "Morning," she said, leaning up to give me a quick peck on the cheek. That was more affection than I'd gotten the previous day, so it took me by surprise. "Morning?" I replied, eyeing her carefully. "Everything all right?" "Sure," she said, opening the fridge to grab some yogurt. "Just reading about some changes with the reunion schedule. Harriet texted me that they might move the dinner portion to a different venue because of renovations. Does that bother you?" She shook her head too vigorously. No, just an inconvenience, but it'll be fine." I decided not to pry. Instead, I made a mental note to watch how she acted the rest of the day. Before heading out, I scrolled through my own email client updates, reminders, random newsletters. Nothing caught my eye. Meanwhile, Fiona's phone buzzed twice in quick succession. She read the messages, let out a resigned sigh, and typed a response with an air of frustration. "Harriet again?" I asked. She paused, then gave a non-committal nod. At the office, James Parker was already hunched over a stack of financial statements. The day loomed long for both of us, but at least we had some good news. The Strandwell tech files were shaping up, thanks to an earlier breakthrough in how they'd mislabeled their expenses. Around mid-morning, I found myself glancing at my phone more than usual, half expecting Fiona to text me about something trivial, to signal that normalcy still existed between us. But no messages came. By lunch, I had grown antsy. I was messing up simple calculations, rechecking my work multiple times. James noticed my restlessness. "You sure you're okay, Andrew?" he asked, tapping a pencil on the edge of my desk. "You seem wired." I sighed, sitting back in my chair. "It's Fiona. She's been acting distant. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but we have this reunion next week. She's super caught up in it. I can't tell if it's just nostalgia or something else." James frowned thoughtfully. "You think there's more to it?" "I'm not sure," I admitted, rubbing my temples. "But I get this feeling in my gut. You know when small details start adding up, but you can't quite put your finger on what's wrong?" He nodded. "Maybe talk to her directly?" I forced a small laugh. "Yeah, maybe, but what if it's just me being paranoid?" "I don't want to accuse her of anything." James gave a half shrug, half smile. "In my experience, open conversation is better than letting your imagination run wild, but hey, that's just me." I appreciated the advice, yet I doubted a heart-to-heart would fix my suspicions right now, especially if Fiona was truly hiding something. I told James I'd think about it, then threw myself back into the day's tasks, hoping that burying my head in work would keep my anxiety at bay. By early evening, I was stepping out for a coffee break in the building's lobby when my phone buzzed. I fished it out, hoping it was Fiona, but it was Harriet. That was unusual. She rarely messaged me directly. "Hey, Andrew, everything good with you and Fiona? She seems stressed. Let me know if you need anything." My brow furrowed. Harriet's text sounded innocent on the surface, but it was odd she'd reach out to me about Fiona's stress. Why not just talk to Fiona directly? unless Harriet was trying to gauge my awareness of something else. I typed a slow reply. "We're fine, thanks. Just busy. Everything okay on your end?" She responded within minutes. "Oh yeah, just making sure you both are well. With the reunion shifting schedules, Fiona's under a lot of pressure." I stared at her message, feeling that same unease coil inside me. Pressure from a reunion? Harriet was either covering for something, or I was reading too much into simple texts. Since I didn't want to give away my suspicion, I kept my reply polite and brief. That night, Fiona returned home later than usual. She claimed she'd been shopping for last-minute accessories with Harriet, but I noticed she had no shopping bags. Her expression was guarded, a faint shadow of worry crossing her features when she asked if I'd eaten dinner yet. "I grabbed a quick bite," I said, trying to sound casual. "Long day?" "Yeah," she murmured, running a hand through her hair. "Harriet and I drove around checking out new venues for next week. Nothing's finalized yet." I wondered why she had no photos to show me, no excited commentary about potential places. That's usually her style. She'd be rattling off details, complaining about the menu, or praising the decor. This time she offered nothing, and I didn't press. Instead, we drifted into an awkward lull, then parted ways in the house, me heading to my home office to check some final numbers on a client's ledger, Fiona wandering to the kitchen to fix herself a small salad. Half an hour later, a subdued conversation echoed from the kitchen. It sounded like Fiona was on a phone call. The quiet, urgent tone made me pause. I slipped out of my office and edged closer to the doorway, just in time to catch a snippet of her voice. "I already told you no. I can't talk right now. Andrew's here. I fine tomorrow, okay?" A soft beep indicated she'd hung up. My heart thumped heavily. I scurried back to my office before she noticed me eavesdropping. Moments later, she came by my door, forced a light smile, and said she was heading to shower. "Everything good?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Mm-hmm," she replied. "Just Harriet again. You know, the usual." Her gaze flicked away from me. I nodded stiffly, letting her walk off. But that snippet of conversation, the stress in her voice, the mention of me fueled my concerns even more. Despite my growing doubt, I tried to keep life going as normally as I could. The following day, I left for work early, telling Fiona I'd see her in the evening. She barely responded, half lost in her phone. Once at the office, James again commented I looked like I'd barely slept. I admitted I was juggling personal stuff, leaving it at that. He gave me a look that said he wanted to help, but he didn't push. The day dragged on until lunchtime. I was about to head out for a quick sandwich when Harriet called. Not texted, she called. My stomach flipped at the sight of her name on the caller ID, but I answered, keeping my tone professional. "Andrew, hi," Harriet began, sounding breathless. "Listen, about next week's reunion, Fiona mentioned you might be too busy to attend all the events. Is that true?" My pulse spiked. "I never said that," I replied slowly. "Fiona knows I'm planning to go." There was a short pause. "Oh, well, maybe she misheard. Anyway, just letting you know there's a dinner at Romano's on Friday before we move to the club. If you can't make it, no worries, but—" "I'll be there," I cut in, my voice sharper than intended. Something about Harriet's question smelled fishy. Why would Fiona claim I might skip? Harriet let out an awkward laugh. "Great. See you then. Sorry if I bothered you. Bye." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, mind spinning. Fiona had told Harriet I might be too busy to attend? That was the last thing I remembered discussing with Fiona. She knew I was free that night. So why lie? Or was Harriet twisting her words? My gut said it was more likely Fiona was distancing me from her little circle of reunion friends. By the time I got home that evening, I had a simmering anger beneath my skin. Fiona noticed my tension, but I tried to keep calm. We had dinner quietly, just leftover pasta and a few scattered remarks about our days. I debated confronting her, but the look on her face told me she'd dodge any direct questions. After dinner, she retreated to the bedroom, checking her phone more than once. I decided to give it one more night. If the weirdness persisted, I'd force a frank conversation. Yet even as I told myself that, a voice in my head nagged. It might already be too late. A week flashed by in a haze of tension and half-baked attempts at civility. Fiona barely looked me in the eye, and I found myself drowning in the daily routine. I clung to the hope that actually attending this pre-reunion dinner might give some answers. If something was going on, I'd spot it firsthand. Friday arrived, gray clouds swirling over the city. Fiona and I drove to the restaurant in tense silence. She fiddled with her phone nearly the entire ride, sometimes texting Harriet, sometimes someone else she refused to say. I tried to quell my growing dread. If Fiona was this excited about seeing her old classmates, I reminded myself, maybe it was just nostalgic jitters. We pulled into the parking lot of the Meadows, an upscale place known for private dining rooms and a decent wine list. In the past, Fiona and I would have chatted about how the restaurant had grown popular or shared random anecdotes from our day. Tonight, we said almost nothing as we walked inside. Waiting near the hostess stand, Harriet Gray and Ethan Gray waved us over. Harriet wore a bright floral dress, while Ethan sported a blazer that looked one size too big. They both greeted Fiona enthusiastically, hugging her and exchanging inside jokes about high school. Then Harriet turned to me, offering a polite but somewhat forced smile. "Hey, Andrew," she said, voice sounding overbright. "Glad you made it." I nodded. "Sure, wouldn't miss it." We ended up at a round table set for 8. 4 other classmates trickled in. People whose names I vaguely recognized from Fiona's stories. Conversation buzzed, mostly about old pranks, memorable teachers, or who had changed the most since graduation. I tried to stay engaged, but I noticed Fiona kept sliding her chair closer to Harriet, or glancing around the restaurant as if searching for someone. Partway through dinner, Harriet excused herself and pulled Fiona along to the restroom. The two left in a hurry, giggling as if they had some private mission. Ethan gave me a knowing shrug, then turned back to a woman named Sophia who was talking about her job in real estate. A sour feeling coiled in my stomach. The entire night so far, Fiona hadn't really spoken to me. About 20 minutes later, Harriet and Fiona still hadn't returned. The check had arrived, and some of the classmates were already standing, saying they'd head to the club soon. A cold weight formed in my chest, spurring me to ask Ethan where the 2 women went. He looked momentarily flustered. Harriet mentioned something about a phone call. Maybe they found a quieter spot to talk. Why don't you just meet us at the club?" I narrowed my eyes. I'd rather find my wife first. Ethan gave an awkward cough and half-smile. "Of course, yeah. Last I saw them, they were near the lobby, near the coat check." Without another word, I stood and made my way to the lobby. 2 minutes of searching revealed no sign of Fiona or Harriet. Frustrated, I returned to the dining area. By that time, Ethan and Harriet's other friends were gathering purses and jackets. "Wait," I said loudly, catching their attention. "Where exactly did Harriet go? I checked the lobby. They're not there." A couple of them averted their eyes. One man mumbled, "They left with some classmates, said they'd catch a ride to the club." I stared, disbelief creeping across my face. They left? Without me? Fiona was my wife. Why wouldn't she tell me? My pulse pounded, a mix of anger and betrayal. I clenched my jaw, forcing a calm facade. "Which club?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "Night Owl. 10 minutes away. We'll see you there, okay?" He and Harriet's circle basically brushed past me, hurrying out as if I might cause a scene. My chest felt tight. In the space of half an hour, Fiona had gone from ignoring me to straight up abandoning me. Something was off, seriously off. Determined to get answers, I left the Meadows, hopped into my car, and drove to Night Owl, ignoring speed limits more than I should have. The storm clouds overhead matched the turmoil in my mind. I arrived to find a line outside the club, throbbing music emanating from within. Flashes of neon cut through the gloom every time the front doors opened. Pushing through the crowd, I bypassed the bouncer with a quick flash of my ID, scanning the dance floor for any sign of Fiona or Harriet. Strobe lights flickered across a sea of bodies. The bass thrummed in my ears, making it harder to concentrate. Then I spotted them Harriet off to one side, talking to Ethan. No Fiona. Harriet made eye contact with me and her face fell. She quickly turned away, whispering something to Ethan. Immediately, they both disappeared into a mass of dancing people. Anger flared in me. This was beyond rude. I moved deeper into the club, weaving between couples and groups. My heart hammered not from the music, but from the rising dread that Fiona was doing something that would change our marriage forever. I spotted a back area illuminated by colored lights, where the dance floor stretched out in swirling bodies. That's when I saw it. Fiona stood pressed against a tall, dark-haired man in a tailored shirt. Their bodies fit together in a way that reeked of intimacy. His hands roamed her waist, occasionally drifting lower. Her arms were draped around his neck. My vision blurred around the edges for a moment, the music beating like a cruel countdown. A jolt of recognition struck me when I realized who the man was. Damon Price, the same name Fiona had mentioned weeks ago. A wave of nausea hit me. I forced myself closer. Under the flashing lights, it was unmistakable. Fiona's eyes were closed, her face lifted toward Damon's in rapturous devotion. Terror, anger, heartbreak, all warred inside me. I stood there, a statue among the swaying crowd. They kissed, oblivious to onlookers. My ears rang, drowning out the music. This couldn't be real. Not my wife, not the person I shared a home with for 5 years. Several of Fiona's classmates lurked nearby, darting glances in my direction. None approached. It seemed they all knew. Harriet was nowhere to be seen now, and Ethan had vanished too. Clearly, they didn't want to be near me when the bomb detonated. Eventually, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. Someone tapped my shoulder. It was a vaguely familiar face, a woman named Sophia from dinner earlier. She looked at me with pity. "Andrew, maybe we should—" Before she could finish, the crowd parted enough for Fiona to notice me. Her eyes widened in shock, but almost instantly, her expression shifted to something else, a twisted mix of guilt and defiance. Damon stepped back slightly, regarding me with a self-assured smirk. I realized with horror that he wasn't even ashamed. Fiona let out a nervous laugh. "Andrew, I didn't think you'd come so fast." My voice felt stuck in my throat. "You left the restaurant without me," I finally managed, each word trembling with pent-up anger. Damon wrapped an arm around Fiona's waist, claiming her openly. "This is Damon," Fiona said, avoiding my gaze. "He and I have a history, and we've decided we're tired of lying about it. I'm sorry." I blinked, my hands shaking. "You're sorry?" I repeated, barely hearing my own voice over the pounding bass. "This is how you tell me you're cheating?" Fiona's face hardened. "Look, it was going to come out anyway. We've been seeing each other for a while. Damon is my true love." Her voice cracked slightly on those last words, but she lifted her chin in defiance. Time seemed to slow to a painful crawl. I stared at Damon, who gave me this smug tilt of his head, like he'd just won a prize. Around us, people either danced on obliviously or watched with scandalized interest. Some recognized me from dinner, quickly turning away to avoid my eyes. A wave of humiliation flooded my system. "True love," I echoed bitterly. "Fiona, we're married." She exhaled, exasperated. "Don't make a scene, Andrew. It's over. I'm done living a lie. We're getting a divorce." Tears blurred my vision, but anger kept them from falling. My fists balled at my sides, and for one reckless second I pictured punching Damon's arrogant face. But something inside me clicked, reminding me that losing control here would only make me look pathetic. Instead, I glared at him. Damon spoke up, voice dripping with condescension. "Look, man, I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but it's better than Fiona sneaking around, right? She deserves to be with the person she really loves." I opened my mouth to retort, but no words came. My chest felt hollow, as if a chunk of my life had been forcibly ripped out in front of everyone. A few more sets of curious eyes pinned me from the sidelines, though nobody approached to offer comfort or break the tension. Fiona gently disentangled herself from Damon's arm and stepped toward me, her posture rigid. "I'll move out soon," she said quietly, though her voice held no genuine remorse. "Let's keep it civil, okay?" "Civil?" I hissed, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "You humiliate me in front of all these people and you want civil?" Her eyes briefly flickered with guilt, but she gave a small shrug. "We both knew our marriage wasn't perfect. This is just me admitting it, Andrew." Damon reached for her again, and she let him. My head spun. Without another word, I turned on my heel and pushed through the dancers, ignoring the shocked glances. The bouncer at the door asked if I was all right, but I brushed him off, stumbling into the night air. Outside, the pounding club music faded into the distance. Cool wind slapped me awake. My chest rose and fell, each breath ragged. In less than an hour, my entire marriage had shattered in the most public, humiliating way possible. Anger flared again as I imagined how Fiona and Damon must have planned this. Maybe Harriet, Ethan, and others knew for weeks. A small voice in my mind told me to keep calm, to think this through. If I lashed out physically or verbally, I'd only harm myself. No, I needed to be strategic. But first, I needed to mourn, needed to confront the reality that everything I thought I had was gone. My hands trembled as I fished my car keys out of my pocket. I slipped behind the wheel, slamming the door shut. For several long minutes, I just stared through the windshield, my heart pounding. Finally, I started the engine. As the car rumbled to life, I glanced at my wedding ring. I twisted it once, tears threatening to breach my eyes. Tonight changed everything. Rain began to fall, tapping unevenly on the car roof. I gripped the steering wheel, telling myself to drive away, but my hands shook too much to start. The humiliating scene replayed in slow motion in my mind. Damon's smug face, Fiona's cold declaration, the cluster of classmates gossiping in corners of the club. A lump formed in my throat. A knock on my passenger window made me jump. The bouncer from earlier, a broad-shouldered man in a black jacket, peered inside. He gestured for me to roll down the window. Warily, I did. "You okay, buddy?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "Saw you storm out. You looked pretty upset." I swallowed hard, resisting the urge to snap. It wasn't his fault. "I'm not great," I admitted, exhaling. He nodded. "Figured as much. I've seen some ugly breakups, but that one looked rough. Just take it easy if you're going to drive, all right?" "Sure," I managed, offering a tight smile. "Thanks." He gave a sympathetic nod, tapped the roof of my car, and stepped away into the rain. The kindness from a stranger almost undid me. My vision blurred with tears, and I let them fall. The shock and adrenaline left me drained, teetering on the brink of some dark pit. Yet part of me recognized I needed to get home, to my own space. Flicking on the wipers, I pulled out of the lot. The roads were slick, the streetlights casting distorted reflections on puddles. My mind buzzed, half in a daze. Eventually, I reached our driveway. No, my driveway. I realized with a surge of bitterness. Fiona was as good as gone. I rushed inside, water dripping from my hair onto the hardwood. Everything felt eerily normal in the house, which made the betrayal cut deeper. The same living room furniture we'd chosen together, the framed photo from our wedding perched on the side table. My stomach lurched at the sight of it. I grabbed the photo, staring at the two smiling people who once believed in forever. Without hesitation, I threw it across the room. It hit the wall with a loud crack, glass splintering. For a moment, I stood there, heart thudding. The crash reverberated through the silence. A wave of guilt threatened to surface. I wasn't someone who broke things. But then anger swelled again, reminding me of what Fiona had done. I hurried to the bedroom, flung open the closet. Her clothes hung neatly, a mixture of dresses and tops. The presence of them stung like a fresh wound. Shutting the closet, I paced in circles around the bed, unable to calm my racing thoughts. How long had she been seeing Damon? Did Ethan and Harriet help her? My hand balled into a fist. I considered calling Fiona's phone just to scream at her, demand answers, but I knew it would do no good. She had made her choice, and apparently she didn't care how it would gut me. At some point, exhaustion seeped into my bones. I sank onto the edge of the bed, burying my face in my hands. The memory of Damon's arrogant smirk wouldn't leave me alone. The man took my wife and didn't even bother hiding his triumph. My cheeks burned with shame, knowing half the old classmates witnessed my humiliation. Eventually, I noticed how cold the house felt. I forced myself to my feet and trudged to the thermostat, adjusting it. In the kitchen, I found my leftover dinner from earlier in the fridge, but I had no appetite. Instead, I reached for a half-finished bottle of whiskey in the cabinet, poured a shot, and downed it. It burned on the way down, offering a sliver of numbness that was all too brief. Sometime after midnight, my phone buzzed. My heart jolted. Maybe it was Fiona, but the screen showed an unknown number. Warily, I answered. "Andrew?" a male voice said. "It's Ethan." I nearly hung up right then, but curiosity and anger kept me on the line. "Ethan, You got some nerve calling me. He exhaled shakily. Listen, man, I'm so sorry about tonight. I didn't know Fiona planned to do that so publicly. My grip tightened on the phone. You expect me to believe you had no idea? I spat. You and Harriet scurried off before I could even ask what was going on. Ethan's voice was hushed, maybe to avoid Harriet overhearing. She told us she was going to talk to you privately at the club. We never expected what happened. I swear, man, Harriet and I didn't help her plan that. I doubted his sincerity, but let him ramble. He mentioned how Fiona and Damon had reconnected months ago when Damon moved back from out of state. They'd texted, met for coffee, grown closer. Ethan sounded uneasy, admitting he'd heard rumors but didn't want to meddle in Fiona's marriage. You should have told me, I muttered, choking back the tears. If you were a real friend, you'd have let me know what was happening behind my back. He fumbled for an excuse. I didn't want to break Fiona's trust, and Harriet insisted we stay out of it. We thought you two would figure it out on your own. My anger flared again. Great job with that. Now I'm the last to know. Thanks, Ethan. He tried to apologize once more, but I hung up, not wanting to hear it. For a moment I stared at the phone, my hands trembling. It hit me that multiple people probably knew about the affair, marking me as a clueless fool. I tossed the phone onto the couch, paced restlessly in the living room. My eyes landed on that broken wedding photo. Shards of glass caught the overhead light, mocking me. I picked it up, ripping the photo out of the cracked frame. Fiona's smile in the picture looked so genuine it turned my stomach. Without thinking, I tore the photo in half, then in half again, until it was just a confetti of worthless scraps. I didn't sleep properly that night. Maybe I dozed on the couch for an hour or two, whiskey dulling the edges of my pain. But by dawn, my eyes were open, my mind locked on one thing. I refused to let Fiona and Damon trample me. If she wanted to run off with him, fine. But I'd be damned if they got to destroy my life completely. That morning, I stood in the living room, surveying the aftermath of my anger. Broken glass, torn photos, a general sense of wreckage that matched the state of my heart. My chest felt heavy, yet a spark of determination flickered in my gut. They humiliated me in front of a crowd. They made me look weak and clueless. But I wasn't helpless. I was Andrew Reed, an accountant who knew how to track details, spot hidden anomalies, and protect my own interests. I had resources, knowledge, and enough willpower to ensure I wouldn't be a victim forever. I gathered a few cardboard boxes from the garage, marched back inside, and started packing Fiona's belongings with methodical precision. Clothes, shoes, random knickknacks. My mind raced with half-formed ideas on how to shield my assets and what legal steps I might need to take. Then I remembered Harriet's mention of Damon being some kind of finance guy. If he was financially sloppy, maybe there was something I could uncover. A bitter smile touched my lips. I thought of Damon's smug expression and pictured a scenario where he'd pay for his arrogance. It was a strange comfort, fueling me with enough energy to keep going. I sealed the first box and labeled it with a piece of tape, Fiona Closet. My phone chirped with a text. This time it was James Parker, noticing I hadn't come to work. I typed a curt reply. Family emergency. I'll explain later. I returned to my packing, my mind coldly assessing the situation. The heartbreak was raw, but a seed of vengeance was taking root, pushing aside the grief. Maybe it was the only way I'd survive this betrayal, by ensuring they didn't get the last laugh. As I lugged the boxes to the living room, a sliver of sunlight broke through the rainy morning clouds, illuminating the shards of broken glass on the floor. I almost laughed at how symbolic it looked. My life in pieces. But the sun's presence hinted that not all was lost. I'd find a way to rebuild on my own terms. By mid-morning, I had a small pile of Fiona's possessions stacked near the front door. My phone rang, this time from a blocked number. I ignored it. I suspected it might be Fiona or Harriet, but I was nowhere near ready to talk. Stepping outside for a breath of fresh air, I let the crisp breeze wash over me. In my mind, the image of Damon and Fiona entangled on that dance floor kept replaying. Instead of drowning in self-pity, I felt my blood simmer with fresh determination. They thought they could flaunt their affair, ruin my life, and walk away unscathed. We'd see about that. Nighttime in the neighborhood felt too quiet, as if the world itself was tiptoeing around my shattered reality. The moment I got home after that awful scene at the club, I slammed the door and just stood in the hallway, breathing hard. The walls pressed in on me. Every corner of the house a reminder of Fiona. I dropped my car keys on the small wooden table by the entrance, the same one where Fiona used to leave little sticky notes reminding me to pick up groceries or meet her for lunch. Those notes had felt so endearing back then. Now they just felt like lies. I found myself walking straight to the front door again, flipping the deadbolt. There was this urge, almost an obsession, to lock everything down. She wasn't going to stroll back in here like nothing happened. My fingers fumbled on my phone as I Googled a nearby locksmith's 24-hour service. I needed new locks right now. The locksmith who arrived, a guy named Chad wearing a navy blue polo, looked half asleep but was polite enough not to pry. He just nodded as I explained that I needed everything changed. The front door, back door, even the garage side entrance. When he finished drilling and replacing hardware, I handed him cash, not wanting any paper trail that might delay the job. He told me to have a good night, shot me a sympathetic look, and then disappeared into the darkness. Alone again, I sank onto the living room couch, blinking at the overhead light. Nothing felt real. 1 minute, I had a wife. The next, I was humiliated in front of her old classmates, blindsided by Damon Price's smug grin. Shaking, I dug through the side table drawer for a bottle of over-the-counter sleeping pills, hoping they'd dull my mind enough to rest. Then my gaze fell on our wedding photo perched on the shelf. The sight of Fiona's wide smile, my arm wrapped around her waist, it pushed me over the edge. I shot off the couch, grabbed the photo, and hurled it at the wall. The frame shattered, shards clattering across the floor. My breath came quick, tears stinging my eyes. Next thing I knew, I was ripping down any other pictures of us I could find, yanking them off the walls. A raw, angry sound escaped my throat. I barely recognized my own voice. That rage only lasted a few minutes before I collapsed to my knees, a wave of sadness hitting me like a punch to the gut. My chest felt hollow. I clutched one of the torn photos, staring at Fiona's face. Why had she done this? We'd been married 5 years. Sure, we had our arguments, everyone does, but I never once imagined she'd stage a public betrayal. Had all our memories been fake? At some point, I pulled myself off the floor and wandered into our bedroom. The bed sheets still smelled like her coconut shampoo. Biting back a sob, I grabbed the duvet, yanked it off, then hurled it into the hallway. My mind buzzed with thoughts. I should burn these, toss them out, anything to erase her. Eventually, I flipped on the overhead light. I'd left a stack of cardboard boxes in the garage for recycling. That would do. Stepping into the garage, I rifled around until I found them. Back in the bedroom, I laid one box open on the floor and started piling in Fiona's clothes. Dresses, sweaters, shirts I used to love seeing her wear. My motions were jerky and uncoordinated, an outpouring of confusion. Minutes turned into hours. The quiet house felt unnaturally still, except for the shuffle of clothes and the occasional tearful gasp escaping my throat. Sometime after midnight, I decided I needed a break. I slumped against the bedroom wall, pinching the bridge of my nose. My eyes burned from crying, from anger, from betrayal. I could practically feel the negativity leaching into my bones. I forced myself up and headed to the kitchen. The overhead light was harsh, revealing traces of an untidy meal we never finished. I grabbed a glass, filled it with water, and took a shaky sip. That's when the memories attacked. Fiona singing to herself while cooking spaghetti last month. Fiona dancing in her socks by the fridge. A strangled groan escaped me, and I nearly dropped the glass. As if on autopilot, I walked back to the couch in the living room, rummaging in the cushions until I found my phone. I stared at the screen, half expecting a text from Fiona apologizing or something. Nothing. Just silence and a couple spam emails. The emptiness of it all hit me again. Before I could spiral, I remembered I had to do more than just mope. I needed to make sure she couldn't march back in here acting like this was still partly her home. The locksmith had done the main locks, but I wanted to gather every spare key she might have left. I spent the next half hour searching the house for spare keys and came up with 2 extras, one hidden behind a painting, another in a junk drawer. I stashed them somewhere new. Time crawled, and eventually the dim glow of dawn crept through the windows, painting the living room in pale blues. My muscles ached, my head pounded. The whiskey I'd sipped for courage was wearing off, replaced by sheer emotional exhaustion. I glanced at the clock. 6:15 a.m. Somehow I'd survived the first night without sleep, fueled only by a toxic mix of heartbreak and fury. Yet amid that bone-deep fatigue, a sliver of determination sparked. I wasn't going to let Fiona and Damon run my life. If she'd had the nerve to stage that spectacle, I'd find the nerve to fight back legally, emotionally, financially, whatever it took. I stared at the stacked boxes near the door, full of her belongings. As soon as I mustered the energy, I'd drag them out to the garage or toss them in her friend Harriet's driveway. A dull headache blossomed behind my eyes. My reflection in the hallway mirror showed a haggard man with reddened eyes, hair standing in every direction. "You're not a victim," I muttered under my breath. "Not anymore." It sounded hollow, but also oddly comforting. Wiping my face, I trudged to the kitchen table where my laptop bag rested. Work. I had a client meeting in 2 days. The last thing I felt like doing was sorting through spreadsheets, but maybe focusing on something rational would help. I set the bag on the table and pulled out my laptop, forcing my mind into professional mode. My firm Reed Accounting depended on me to keep it together. As I logged in, I remembered that James Parker had a project we were supposed to finalize next week. James was a good friend, loyal and sharp. He'd noticed something was off. So be it. No sense hiding the truth, my marriage was over, though I doubted I'd share the humiliating details just yet. I typed aimlessly for a few minutes, half-heartedly checking my email. My eyes kept sliding back to that box of Fiona's clothes. A new wave of fury pulsed, but exhaustion held me captive. I forced out a slow breath, letting the haze of sleeplessness swallow me up. Eventually, my eyelids grew too heavy. I set the laptop aside and stumbled to the couch, collapsing onto the cushions. My last thought before darkness claimed me was that come morning, real morning, when normal people woke up, I'd have to figure out the next steps. I'd have to protect myself, financially and emotionally. No matter how much it hurt, I was done letting Fiona's betrayal define me. She'd see soon enough that I wasn't just some clueless husband to trample. As I drifted off into a restless doze, the faint glimmer of resolve in my chest was all I had to hold on to. A loud knock jarred me awake. I bolted upright on the couch, disoriented. My phone screen read 10:12 a.m., definitely not how I planned on starting the day. I rubbed my face, wincing at the dull ache in my neck. I must have crashed on the couch for 3, maybe 4 hours tops. The knock sounded again. With a groan, I pushed myself up and headed for the front door. My heart pounded at the thought it might be Fiona, but when I looked through the peephole, I saw James Parker standing there, shifting his weight nervously. I pulled the door open a crack, remembering I had brand new locks. James wore a concerned expression, a stack of folders tucked under his arm. "Andrew, hey," he said gently. "You weren't answering calls. I got worried." Calls? I hadn't even checked my phone logs. I mumbled an apology and let him in. James glanced around the living room, eyes falling on the overturned boxes and bits of shattered glass from the photo frame. His brows knit together in alarm. "What happened here?" he asked, lowering his voice as if afraid to spook me. I hesitated, swallowing hard. "Fiona's gone," I finally said, my tone raw. "She left me for someone else. Did it publicly last night?" James looked stunned. "Man, I'm so sorry. Why didn't you call me?" I shrugged, picking up a stray piece of glass and dropping it into the trash bin. "Wasn't in the mood to talk, I guess. I changed the locks, packed her stuff. I'm not letting her waltz back in here." He nodded slowly. "I understand. Look, I only stopped by because we had that client file to finalize. But screw that. I can handle it if you need time. You sure you're okay?" My eyes burned, but I forced a small smile. "Not okay, but I'm dealing. Thanks, James. Actually, maybe I can use a distraction. But first, I need some help." James placed the folders on the coffee table. "Anything, name it." I sat down, motioning him to join me. "I'm severing all joint finances with Fiona bank accounts, credit cards, everything. She's not draining me dry, not after what she pulled." He nodded in firm agreement. "Smart move. We can log into the accounts right now, remove her access, or freeze them if needed." That's exactly what we did. He opened his laptop, I grabbed mine. Together, we tackled the online dashboards for our personal checking and savings accounts, as well as a few credit cards in both our names. By the end of it, Fiona's name was off the joint accounts, and any credit lines were canceled or replaced with new ones in my sole ownership. The knowledge that she no longer had free rein to my finances lifted a small weight off my shoulders. Worn out but focused, I thanked James. He said he'd come by the office later if I felt up to it. Before he left, he gave my shoulder a supportive squeeze. "Keep me updated, okay? Don't shut me out." His concern warmed me. After he was gone, I stepped back into the living room, scanning for anything else that tied me to Fiona. My gaze settled on a small table full of random household paperwork. Warranties, old receipts, a stack of junk mail. I realized half of it had Fiona's name plastered on top. I grabbed a garbage bag, stuffing in every piece that didn't matter. She could dig through it if she ever wanted her old store coupons. While sorting the clutter, the doorbell rang. This time, a surge of anger shot through me. I had a feeling it might be Harriet or Ethan. Sure enough, when I opened the door, there they stood, Harriet, eyes darting anxiously, and Ethan with his hands shoved in his pockets. Behind them, in the driveway, I spotted Harriet's SUV loaded with a couple of empty boxes. "Andrew," Harriet began, forcing a thin smile. "We wanted to check on you, see if—" "No," I cut in, my voice icy. "You want to check on Fiona's stuff, right? That's all." Ethan cleared his throat. "We just heard about last night. It got out of hand. Listen, I didn't let him finish. Stepping back, I pointed at the boxes I'd already packed. "Take them. You can give them to her, or toss them in a river for all I care." Harriet's cheeks flushed. She made a move to step inside, but I planted a hand on the doorframe. "You don't come in," I said firmly. She blinked nervously, then nodded. Ethan shot her a look, and together they picked up the boxes of Fiona's clothes, shoes, personal items I'd shoved in. I could see Harriet's lip quivering as she placed a second box on top of the first. Good. Let them feel guilty. "Andrew, we just want you to know we didn't plan that scene at the club," Harriet whispered, her eyes brimming with what looked like genuine remorse. "Fiona never told us she'd humiliate you like that." I stared at her, my throat tight with fury. "Maybe. But you knew something. Don't act clueless." She cast her gaze down, no argument there. Ethan muttered something under his breath, hauling the boxes onto the porch. Then, in a last-ditch attempt, Harriet gently set a small envelope on the step, near my feet. "This is Fiona's new address if you need to reach her. She's staying with Damon. Just do what you will." My jaw clenched. I picked up the envelope, tossed it aside, and glared. "Please leave." Neither Harriet nor Ethan argued. They retreated to the SUV, loaded Fiona's boxes, and drove off. As I watched them go, a shaky sigh escaped me. I told myself this was for the best cutting ties with her circle of enablers. After shutting the door, I returned to the clutter on the table. One thing I couldn't ignore was a letter with the return address of a local utility company in Damon's name. My brow furrowed. Why would we get something related to Damon here? Then I remembered Fiona occasionally handled bills for some of her old high school acquaintances if they traveled or something. At least that's what she once told me. Suddenly, curiosity piqued. Tearing the envelope open, I found a billing statement referencing a property address I didn't recognize, possibly Damon's. The charges were surprisingly high. It could have been nothing, but a weird impulse made me slip the letter into my laptop bag. My accountant brain buzzed with suspicion. Maybe Damon had finances that were all over the place, or maybe there was more to it. I carried the thought back to the couch, recalling rumors that Damon worked in some finance role. If his finances were messy, it might be an angle for me to protect myself. Anger flared again at the memory of him smirking at the club. I needed a clearer picture of who he was, how stable his job was, and whether Fiona was walking into a financial disaster. Not that I cared about her future with him, but if they tried to come after me for anything, I needed leverage. By mid-afternoon, I'd turned on my laptop, scanning public records for Damon Price. I found a half-finished LinkedIn page, some vague references to consulting. Nothing conclusive. My phone buzzed a text from James checking on me. I typed back, "I'm okay. Question for you tomorrow. Let's talk." Setting the phone aside, I combed through more search results, stumbling upon a short local news mention from a year ago about a small real estate venture Damon was part of. It closed abruptly, reasons undisclosed. Another piece to the puzzle. In my emotionally charged state, I latched on to any scrap of data that could point to shady dealings. Part of me felt guilty digging for dirt, but the rest insisted it was self-preservation. Outside, a neighbor's lawnmower droned in the distance. I realized how normal the day must look for everyone else. Only behind my locked doors was life drastically altering. Slumping back, I stared at the utility bill again. The monthly charges were triple the local average, possibly meaningless. Possibly a clue to bigger secrets. A new wave of fatigue hit me as I stuffed the documents in a folder labeled Damon Personal Research. Tomorrow I might ask James for help. He was better at analyzing irregularities. For now, I just needed to accept that I was alone in this house and start rebuilding from scratch, one step at a time. I hopped in the shower, scrubbing off the filth of heartbreak. The hot water stung my tired muscles. As steam rose around me, I closed my eyes and pictured Damon's arrogant face. Instead of pure rage, I felt a steely resolve coalescing. He'd humiliated me, both he and Fiona. But numbers don't lie. If there was something shady in Damon's financial world, I'd find it, because I refused to be the gullible husband everyone pitied. Stepping out, I dried off, dressed, and headed to the kitchen for a quick dinner, something simple like a microwavable burrito. My appetite was minimal, but I forced myself to eat, reminding myself I had to stay sharp. Emotional meltdown or not, I still had a life to manage. As night fell again, the house felt emptier than ever, but ironically, I felt more aware, more awake. Breaking ties with Fiona's friends, securing my accounts, spotting a potential lead on Damon's finances, it all gave me a fragile sense of control. A start, at least. Curling up on the couch, I decided sleep could wait. I opened my laptop again and typed notes about Damon's real estate fiasco, that suspicious utility bill, anything else I recalled from Fiona's idle comments about him. My heartbeat steadied, a slow drum of determination. I had no idea how deep I'd have to dig or how ugly this might get, but if Damon Price was playing fast and loose with money, I'd uncover it. And for the first time since the club fiasco, I felt a glimmer of something other than despair, a hint of purpose, a reason to fight. Morning arrived with a gray, overcast sky, perfectly matching my mood. I woke early despite the restless night, rummaging for coffee grounds in the cabinet. The house felt colder than usual, as if the furnace had taken on my emotional chill. While waiting for the coffee to brew, I scrolled through my phone notifications. Among them was a missed call from an unknown number. Then I spotted a text from a local law firm. Mr. Reed, please contact us regarding divorce proceedings on behalf of Miss Fiona Reed. My stomach twisted. She had wasted no time. Sighing, I sipped my coffee, letting the bitterness ground me. So Fiona was officially lawyering up. Fine. She wanted to bring lawyers into this? I'd do the same, call my own attorney. I flicked through my contacts until I found my old friend, Carla Diaz, an attorney I'd met through a mutual client last year. We'd never dealt with anything so personal, but I trusted her. I texted Carla. Need legal advice ASAP divorce situation. Please let me know if you can help. Setting the phone aside, I recalled that the outline of my plan was forming. I'd protect my finances and gather info on Damon in case I needed leverage. Already I could sense a tension in the air, like the hush before a thunderstorm. By mid-morning, James Parker popped by again, this time bringing me lunch from a nearby deli. He was clearly worried about me skipping meals. I appreciated the gesture. We sat in my living room, sandwiches in hand, the remains of Fiona's presence all around us. Boxes, scattered photos, replaced locks, signs of a torn life. How you holding up? James asked gently between bites of his turkey sandwich. I shrugged. I've been better. Fiona's lawyer texted. She's going for a divorce. Probably wants the house, half my stuff. I can't let her take it. James nodded firmly. You shouldn't. We've worked too hard building your business for you to lose it. Also, that suspicious item you mentioned, Damon's utility bill. I leaned forward, intrigued. Yeah, something's off there, and I suspect it's just the tip of the iceberg. Damon had a real estate deal go bust last year. Could be legit, or it could point to bigger issues. James furrowed his brow, finishing a sip of soda. If he's sloppy financially, that might be your chance to expose him. But how do you find proof? I explained how I discovered a random article and a handful of clues. I was hoping you could help me dig deeper, maybe cross-reference with public records. If he's underreporting income or funneling money somewhere, we might see patterns. James gave me a long look. Andrew, I get it. You want revenge, but are you sure you want to go down that rabbit hole? Could get messy? A flicker of uncertainty passed through me, but I tamped it down. He humiliated me, James. He took my wife. If there's a legal advantage to be had, I'm taking it. I'm not letting them steamroll me. James nodded slowly, setting his sandwich aside. All right, let's do a preliminary check. But man, keep your head straight. You don't want to become so obsessed that you lose track of your own life. Promise me you'll be careful. I mustered a half-hearted grin. I promise. After lunch, James and I huddled over my laptop, cross-referencing Damon's name in public databases. We didn't find anything too incriminating, just hints of possible debt and closed business ventures. But it was enough to give me a thrill. If Damon was living beyond his means, that might come into play if Fiona tried to claim a big settlement. Knowing she was banking on Damon's success made me feel almost smug that his finances were on shaky ground. James eventually headed back to the office, leaving me to my own devices. Late that afternoon, I was going through my mail pile when a certified envelope arrived, dropped off by a courier. The return address read Caldwell and Dunn, attorneys at law, Fiona's new legal team, presumably. My stomach twisted again. Inside, I found a formal demand letter. Fiona was seeking a divorce, claiming irreconcilable differences, plus a request for spousal support. To top it off, they included a proposed restraining order, citing emotional volatility on my part, referencing some alleged threat I supposedly made. My blood boiled as I read the text. She was painting me as a potential aggressor, probably to force me out of the house we shared. I slammed the folder shut, pacing the living room. The gall. First, she humiliates me, then tries to spin me as dangerous. Grabbing my phone, I dialed Carla Diaz, who thankfully picked up on the third ring. She listened patiently as I vented about the letter. All right, Andrew, Carla said in a calm, measured tone. Deep breath. These demands are often standard in divorces involving potential conflict. Doesn't mean the court will grant them. You have any proof Fiona's lying? Proof? I echoed, sinking onto the couch. Everything she did was out in the open at a club. She staged a spectacle. I never laid a hand on her or threatened her. I changed the locks, that's all. Carla's voice stayed cool. Good. That might work in our favor. Forward me the paperwork. I'll prepare a response. Also, do not engage with Fiona directly right now. Don't text her angry messages or anything like that. It could be used against you. I thanked her, heart pounding. After we hung up, I forwarded the documents via email. Then I slumped at the table, glancing at the intangible blueprint forming in my head. Gather ammo against Damon, let Carla handle Fiona's bogus claims, and keep my composure no matter what. Nightfall crept in. I heated up a frozen pizza, fighting the uneasy feeling that my world was about to explode further. My phone buzzed with a text from Harriet. Andrew, please understand Fiona's just hurt. She's lashing out. If you want to talk, I deleted it without replying. Around 10 p.m., I found myself in front of my laptop again, unable to sleep. My frustration with Fiona fueled me to keep researching Damon. If her lawyer was hitting me with a restraining order, she must be counting on Damon to support her. Was that a strong foundation or a flimsy house of cards? Scrolling through old forums and property listing sites, I stumbled on a lead. Damon once partnered with a small-time property flipper who posted a rant about Damon vanishing mid-project. My eyes narrowed. If Damon had a habit of bailing or misappropriating funds, that could be gold in my upcoming legal fight. I carefully saved each snippet of info, building a digital folder labeled Damon Files. By midnight, my eyes were gritty, exhaustion pulling at me, but a grim satisfaction settled in my chest. Let Fiona and her lawyers come at me. Let Damon think he's invincible. I was gathering ammunition, slow and steady. Thunder rumbled outside, the sky finally releasing a light rain. I stared out the window, listening to droplets against the glass. The hush reminded me of that feeling I used to get right before a big storm in childhood, an electric sense that everything was about to unleash. I felt it now, except this time I was preparing for war. With a final check of my phone, No new messages except spam. I shut down my laptop. My limbs felt heavy as I trudged to the bedroom, the one I once shared with Fiona. The bed felt wrong, the emptiness palpable, but the alternative was sleeping on the couch again. I slid beneath the sheets, inhaling a shaky breath. My heart thudded with anger, heartbreak, and maybe a flicker of grim anticipation. Tomorrow would bring more steps in this twisted dance. Fiona might have started it, but I wasn't about to surrender. I woke to the sharp ring of my doorbell cutting through the morning stillness. Adrenaline spiked as I jumped out of bed, heart hammering. I half expected some new legal messenger or maybe a furious Damon. But as I peered through the peephole, I saw Fiona's unmistakable figure. My chest tightened. Why was she here? Steeling myself, I cracked the door open, keeping the chain on. Fiona's eyes flicked up and she let out an exasperated sigh. "Seriously, Andrew? A chain?" I glared. "You got a restraining order in the works. You want me to just fling the door wide?" She looked frustrated, crossing her arms. "That's not final. My lawyer said it was a standard measure." I forced a mirthless laugh. "Standard measure, right? So what do you want?" Fiona shifted her weight. She was dressed casually, jeans and a hoodie, far from the glamorous vibe she'd had around Damon. Her gaze darted over my shoulder, as if trying to see inside. "I want you to move out," she said bluntly. "This house is mine too, and I can't feel safe if you're here." A cold wave of fury washed over me. "Feel safe? I've never touched you in anger in my life, and you know it." She looked away. "It's not about that. We can't live under the same roof. The lawyer says if we can't cooperate, you should go." I tightened my grip on the doorknob. "Not happening. I had the locks changed, and it's all in my name. You want something? Talk to my lawyer." Her jaw tensed. Her jaw. For a moment she hesitated, as if searching for a different angle. "Damon and I need a place. The lease at his condo is up soon." My teeth ground together. "Congratulations. That's your problem, not mine." Fiona's shoulders slumped. Then her eyes flared with anger. "So you won't leave?" "Damn right," I said, voice low. "I'm done caving into you. I haven't harmed you, and this place belongs to me, legally speaking. You think I'd hand it over to you and Damon? Not a chance." She let out a bitter laugh. "You're being spiteful." "Call it what you want," I snapped, then softened my tone just a fraction. "Look, you made your choice. Live with it. You said you want a divorce, so handle it through the proper channels. I'm not budging." Fiona stared at me, frustration etched in every line of her face. For a split second I glimpsed what looked like regret, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She huffed, then turned on her heel. "This isn't over," she tossed over her shoulder, heading down the driveway. I shut the door, chest heaving. That confrontation had left me shaking, but also somewhat triumphant. She'd tried intimidation, and it flopped. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, snapping me out of my trance. It was Carla Diaz, my lawyer friend. "Morning, Andrew," came her measured tone when I answered. "I just got off a call with Fiona's attorneys. They mentioned an attempt to make you vacate the marital home." I assume she showed up? "Yeah, just now," I said, blowing out a breath. "I told her no. She left angry." Carla made a thoughtful noise. "Good. The property trust you set up back when you started your practice is still valid, right?" I nodded, relief flooding me. "Yes, house is held by that trust. Even if it wasn't, I'm not giving it up. She's got no grounds." "Exactly," Carla said. "I'll file a formal response. Don't let her scare you. Just keep your cool. Let me know immediately if she returns or tries anything else." I thanked Carla, hanging up with a renewed sense of conviction. Fiona was the one who strayed. She'd chosen Damon. Now she wanted my home on top of it? Not happening. I set the phone down, noticing my hand trembled. Despite my outward confidence, the emotional toll was huge. Turning to the living room, I glanced at the box labeled Damon Files, where I kept the few suspicious documents I'd collected. My mind churned, recalling how Fiona's lawyer threatened a restraining order. If they pushed me, I'd push back. No more passivity. The rest of the day passed in a tense blur. I kept busy emailing Carla about possible next steps, listing everything Fiona had done since the breakup. At one point, James called, asking if I wanted to meet at a cafe near the office. I agreed, needing a change of scenery. At the cafe, Bean and Barrel, A cozy spot with local art on the walls, I found James sipping a latte by the window. The place bustled with midday chatter, college students hunched over laptops, an older couple reading newspapers. We claimed a small table, ordering coffee and sandwiches. "How'd it go this morning?" James asked, voice low. I rubbed my neck. "Fiona showed up, demanded I move out. I refused. Carla's handling it." James nodded, relief in his eyes. "You do anything else to prepare? She might escalate." My jaw tightened. That's why I'm finalizing my plan to gather evidence on Damon. If Fiona's serious about getting some big settlement, she'll rely on Damon's finances too. But if he's knee-deep in shady stuff, it weakens her position. James leaned forward. "You sure you want to go all in like that? Once you start poking around in Damon's world, you can't unsee what you find." I stared into my coffee, recalling Damon's arrogant face at the club. "He humiliated me, James. He wants to act untouchable? Fine, I'll show him that everything has consequences." James exhaled. "All right, just be careful. Also, we might want to keep any deep dives into Damon's finances off the official company records. Don't want your firm to get tangled in a personal feud." "Exactly," I said grimly. "We'll keep it hush-hush, just between you and me." He handed me a small USB drive. "I did some extra checks on that property flippers complaint you mentioned. Might be relevant. It's all in a folder labeled DP Real Estate Debacle. Some suspicious deposit patterns, but you'll have to interpret them. The doc is password protected with the same one we use for referencing private accounts." I slipped the drive into my jacket pocket, heart pounding with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. This was it, the foundation for my revenge plan. Back at the house later that day, I locked myself in my study and plugged the USB into my personal laptop. I found a cluster of documents referencing Damon's past real estate venture. Bank statements, partial ledgers, accusations from a former partner. The numbers told a murky story, unexplained transfers, inconsistent accounting, enough to hint at either incompetence or deliberate mischief. I couldn't tell for sure, but either way, Damon was no financial saint. As evening fell, a chill ran up my spine. Part of me worried that stepping into Damon's secrets could backfire. But another part relished the idea of having something to hold over him if Fiona's divorce strategy got nasty. If Damon was funneling money or cooking books, that might tilt any court battle in my favor, especially if Fiona assumed she'd ride off into the sunset on Damon's dime. By midnight, I'd compiled everything into a coherent format. A spreadsheet of questionable transactions, a timeline of Damon's business fiascos, notes on the rumor about him ditching a partner. My exhaustion from the day's emotional roller coaster weighed on me, but so did a grim satisfaction. The plan was coming together. I saved the files, securely encrypted them, and shut my laptop. Slumping in my chair, I let out a long, unsteady exhale. My heart still ached from Fiona's betrayal, from the fact that we used to love each other, that we'd built this life I was now tearing apart. But heartbreak was morphing into a cold, purposeful drive. A text pinged my phone. An unknown number. My chest tightened as I read the short, clipped line. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. We'll see you in court." No signature, but I assumed it was Damon. My teeth clenched. He wanted me to roll over? Not a chance. Setting the phone aside, I recalled Fiona's furious face that morning, the trust documents that shielded my home, and the hush of a looming legal storm. My heartbreak was still raw, but I refused to let it paralyze me. Tomorrow I'd finalize the last pieces of my plan, arming myself with every advantage. They thought they'd corner me. They hadn't seen anything yet. With that unwavering thought, I rose from my desk, turned out the light, and walked down the hallway. Yes. I felt wrecked, but I also felt dangerously alive, fueled by a sense of purpose that overshadowed the old pain. Andrew Reed might be shattered, but he wasn't broken, and if Fiona and Damon wanted a war, I was ready to fight. Monday morning dawned cloudy and unsettlingly warm for the season. From my bedroom window, I watched the sun fight its way through a thick layer of gray clouds, the light almost reluctant to spill across the neighborhood. It seemed like an omen. We were heading into murky territory. I pulled on a crisp shirt and my usual work slacks, grabbed my laptop bag, and paused to survey the house. Stacks of files and boxes labeled evidence cluttered the living room. A lesser person might call me paranoid, but I called it preparation. Ever since stumbling on Damon Price's financial discrepancies, I'd been steadily building my case. If he was as shady as the numbers suggested, I intended to expose him thoroughly. By the time I arrived at Reed Accounting, the small firm I'd built from scratch, it was nearing 8:30 a.m. My colleague and friend, James Parker, was already in his office. I spotted him through the glass wall, hunched over his computer, sipping black coffee. He shot me a tight smile as I stepped into his workspace. "Morning, Andrew," he said, voice low. "You sure about pulling the trigger on this today?" I set my laptop on the corner of his desk. "Yeah. If Damon's company has been footing the bill for his personal expenses, I want them to know about it. No more waiting around." James pursed his lips. "All right. Let's finalize the data then. We'll compile it into a neat, anonymous report and forward it to the right executives." All weekend, we'd worked after hours on a thorough audit that pointed to Damon Price misallocating funds at his corporation. It wasn't the usual small-time slip-up either. Suspicious travel receipts, inflated invoices that didn't match any real client. If we were correct, Damon had been siphoning money under the guise of business expenses. No wonder he'd been so confident about securing Fiona's future. James opened a shared spreadsheet, and we carefully reviewed each line item. The more we double-checked, the more glaring the fraud became. We saw nightclubs, high-end hotels that didn't correspond to any legitimate meeting, questionable wire transfers. It painted a picture of a man funding a lavish lifestyle on his employer's dime. Once satisfied we had enough proof, we packaged the findings into a single PDF. James typed a concise cover note, omitting our firm name to protect us from legal blowback. We'd route it through a contact we trusted at Damon's Corporation, a mid-level manager we'd helped with an unrelated project months ago. That manager had once complained about the chaos caused by certain rogue employees. Now he'd have the ammunition to act. James exhaled, sending the email. "Done. We'll see how long it takes for them to escalate this." I nodded, feeling a mix of nerves and grim anticipation. No going back now. If we're right, Damon's about to have one nasty morning. Before I could head to my own office, my phone chimed with a text from Carla Diaz, my lawyer. "Fiona's attorney wants to schedule a settlement meeting. They claim you owe her alimony, plus half the equity in your house. Thoughts?" I tightened my grip on the phone. Was Fiona serious? The house was legally sheltered by a trust I'd set up years ago for asset protection. She had no right to it. And alimony? After her affair? My anger simmered. I quickly typed a response. "No settlement. They can't have what isn't theirs. Use the evidence of adultery if needed." Turning to James, I explained Fiona's move. He rubbed his jaw. "Guess they think you're scared. They have no idea you're not the same Andrew you were a few months ago." "Not even close," I muttered. "If they push me, I'll show the court exactly how Fiona's been living off Damon's fraud. Let's see who's scared then." James shot me a half smile. "Just pace yourself. Revenge is fine, but don't lose your cool in the process. We want you to come out on top, not burned out." I nodded, grateful for his level-headed presence. "Don't worry, this is just me protecting myself." The rest of the day, I threw myself into normal client work. Whenever the stress of my personal situation threatened to overwhelm me, I recalled that morning's email. Damon was likely getting a rude awakening right about now. That mental image fueled me enough to remain focused. Late in the afternoon, as I prepared to leave, James stepped into my office. He looked around to ensure no one else was listening, then quietly closed the door. "Just got a call from my old contact at Damon's Corporation," James said. "They're in uproar mode. Damon's name is flagged in an internal audit. Could escalate quickly." A rush of satisfaction coursed through me, mingled with a twinge of anxiety. Once the company's legal team got involved, Damon might suspect I was behind it, but that was a risk I'd accepted. "Good," I said, forcing calm. "Let them do their job. We'll deny any involvement. Meanwhile, I'll let Carla know we might have more leverage soon." James offered a supportive nod. "Keep me updated, man." After he left, I gathered my belongings. Outside, dusk was settling. The sky looked bruised, purple clouds reflecting the city lights. On the drive home, I couldn't stop picturing Damon's face when he realized the corporation was onto him. Did Fiona know? Was she at that exact moment comforting him in some plush apartment he paid for with stolen funds? The thought fueled a bit of dark pleasure. Reaching my house, the same quiet neighborhood, the same trusting picket fence vibe. I parked in the driveway, noticing a cat slinking around my trash bins. Everything felt oddly normal, yet my life was anything but. I locked my car, scanned the yard for any sign of Fiona lurking about. Nothing. Inside, the living room still wore that half-empty look. I'd cleared away some of Fiona's leftover boxes last week, but her absence remained. Setting my laptop bag on the coffee table, I scrolled through my phone messages again. Carla had emailed me a proposed statement for the impending divorce settlement, basically shutting down Fiona's demands in a firm, legal manner. A small smile curled on my lips. Perfect. Before calling it a night, I microwaved some leftover takeout and flipped on the TV, half watching a nature documentary. The day's tension still vibrated in my bones, but I felt more certain than ever that I was on the right track. Fiona and Damon wanted to waltz off happily ever after? They were about to see how messy life gets when you underestimate the quiet accountant you betrayed. Just as I was finishing my meal, my phone buzzed again, this time a short text from an unknown number. "Heard you're causing problems. Back off." My heart thumped. Damon's style, no doubt. I locked the screen, ignoring the spike of adrenaline. Instead of replying, I set the phone aside. They could threaten me all they wanted. My plan was in motion, and there was no turning back. 2 days later, the storm finally broke for Damon Price. The morning started with a drizzle outside my office window. By mid-morning, I got an urgent phone call from Colin Moore, the mid-level manager James and I had quietly emailed about Damon's alleged fraud. Colin's voice was a hushed whisper. "Andrew, is that you?" I tensed, glancing around. "Yes, keep it brief." He inhaled. "We've frozen Damon's salary pending an investigation. Internal audit found multiple irregularities. Char is furious. They're demanding records from his department. I can't say more without risking my own job, but just thought you should know." My heart pounded as I thanked him and hung up. So it was official. Damon's corporation was halting his pay and demanding an explanation. I pictured Damon scrambling to justify those lavish personal expenses, maybe cursing whoever blew the whistle. Shortly after lunch, James rushed into my office, eyes alight. "Damon's meltdown is apparently all over the office grapevine. Some staffers are whispering about a suspension or possible termination if he can't account for the missing funds." He sat down, letting out a breath. "Looks like your bombshell email did the trick." I nodded, trying not to gloat too openly. "Now we wait and see if he realizes I'm behind it." James set a folder on my desk. "We have plausible deniability. That email was sent from an anonymous account. Worst case scenario, Damon suspects you but can't prove it." I exhaled slowly, thinking about Fiona's reaction. If Damon's assets dried up, she might scramble even harder for a settlement from me. Sure enough, an hour later, my lawyer Carla called, sounding almost smug. "You won't believe this, Andrew," Carla said. "Fiona's lawyer contacted me, ranting about some unexpected financial difficulty Damon's facing. Fiona's doubling down on wanting a chunk of your property." I rolled my eyes. "Of course. She thinks if Damon's going down, I'm her fallback. Not happening." Carla chuckled softly. "Exactly what I told them. Sent them the trust documents ironclad. If they push, we can threaten to disclose Fiona's affair in court. That alone might hurt her claim, especially since it's what led to the marriage breakdown." "Good," I replied, a tight satisfaction in my voice. "Let them squirm. Keep me posted." By late afternoon, a rumor spread that Damon's personal accounts were partly frozen as well due to the corporate investigation. He apparently needed permission to access certain funds until he could prove they weren't embezzled. Gossip traveled fast in the business world. Harriet Gray, who still had connections all over town, texted me. "Andrew, you hearing about Damon? This is crazy. Please don't assume Fiona knew about it. She's in shock." I ignored her text. Harriet might feign ignorance, but she'd chosen her side. I had no sympathy left for that crowd. My mind flicked to Fiona, wondering how she'd respond to learning Damon's money tap was drying up. For a moment, a pang of old emotions flared memories of better times. I quickly pushed them down. She'd made her bed. Driving home felt surreal, the sky clearing to reveal a vibrant sunset. All around the city, people were ending their workday. Damon's meltdown, Fiona's desperation, my own legal defenses, none of that mattered to the folks just trying to get dinner on the table. I found a strange comfort in that mundane reality. That night, I retreated to my small home office, a leftover pizza slice in one hand, scanning emails with the other. James had messaged me a file labeled Employee Chatter, basically a summary of internal Slack messages someone had leaked about Damon. My eyes widened as I read allegations about extravagant business trips with no real client results. It was almost comedic, like he thought nobody would check. My phone buzzed again. Another text from an unknown number, presumably Damon. "You think you're so clever. You'll regret messing with me." I snorted, tossing the phone onto the desk. The irony was almost too thick. He was threatening me while simultaneously drowning in accusations of fraud. I saved the text as evidence, just in case I needed to prove harassment. Then I forced myself to get some sleep, hopeful that I was closer to the final fallout. The next morning, Carla Diaz called bright and early, practically humming with triumph. "Andrew, I've got news. Damon's legal counsel must be scrambling because Fiona's lawyer just floated a smaller settlement offer, like they're testing the waters for a quick agreement." I felt a rush of vindication. Meaning they know Damon can't support Fiona if this goes to court. They're panicking. "Seems like it," Carla confirmed. "I told them no. We'll keep pushing until they fold or present terms that acknowledge your innocence and Fiona's wrongdoing." I thanked her, my mind already spinning on the next steps. Could this whole nightmare end sooner than I thought? Part of me worried about unexpected twists, but another part savored the image of Damon's arrogant smirk fading as his empire collapsed. Later that afternoon, I got a quiet knock on my office door. It was James, looking subdued. He stepped inside, shutting the door. "We just heard from that corporate contact again, Colin. Damon's on indefinite suspension, pending a full forensic audit. Gossip says they have enough to press charges internally if he can't explain the vanished funds." My pulse quickened. So the corporation might turn him over to law enforcement if he can't repay or justify the money. This was bigger than some HR reprimand. James studied my face, concern etched in his brow. "You okay?" he asked. "I know you wanted justice, but this could get ugly. Criminal charges aren't a joke." I nodded slowly. "I know. But Damon asked for this when he messed with me and stole from his company. I'm not celebrating the possibility of jail, but I won't pity him either." James's gaze was sympathetic. "Understood. Let's just hope you don't get caught in the crossfire." As the workday wound down, I glanced at the gray sky outside, feeling a swirl of emotions, vindication, caution, a strange emptiness. Fiona's dream of leaving me for a wealthy savior was toppling, piece by piece. Yet the victory didn't feel as sweet as I once imagined. Still, I reminded myself that this was the direct consequence of betrayal and deception. No one emerges unscathed. The following week brought the dreaded event, the divorce hearing. I arrived at the downtown courthouse early, wearing a sharp suit that felt like armor. Carla Diaz met me in the lobby, her expression cool and confident. We exchanged a few words before heading into the waiting area outside the courtroom. Fiona was already there with her attorney. My heart panged briefly at the sight of her, remembering how once upon a time I'd have done anything for her. Now she couldn't even meet my gaze, her posture stiff. Beside her, a tall man in a charcoal suit, presumably Damon's lawyer, whispered something in her ear. Damon himself was noticeably absent, probably too entrenched in his own corporate scandal to appear. Carla nudged me gently. "Don't let them rattle you. We have a solid stance. The house is in a trust, and Fiona committed adultery. Simple as that." I nodded, taking a slow breath. Soon enough, we were called into a small hearing room where a neutral-faced judge sat behind a raised bench, flipping through files. Fiona's lawyer started by outlining her supposed claims alimony, a share of marital assets, and a vague statement about needing ongoing support. Carla countered with calm assertiveness, presenting documents that proved I was the financially stable party, that Fiona's affair caused the breakdown, and that the house was legally beyond her reach. Tension crackled in the air. Fiona's lawyer tried to paint me as controlling, referencing some nonsense about me locking her out of the house. Carla deftly pointed out how Fiona had vacated the property voluntarily for months, moving in with another man. Then the bombshell arrived. Carla read excerpts of text messages, obtained from Fiona's own phone records, ironically, showing explicit details of Fiona and Damon's affair while we were still married. The judge's eyebrows rose. Fiona's face paled. She shot me a look of wounded indignation as though I'd betrayed her by revealing her secrets. But I forced myself to keep a neutral expression. She was the one who blasted our marriage apart. The truth was the truth. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it brief. Your Honor, I never threatened Fiona. I only changed the locks after she declared she wanted a divorce and moved out. The house belongs to a trust, which she never contributed to. I'm not refusing a fair settlement, but I won't give up what's not rightfully hers. Fiona's lawyer attempted a last-ditch angle, insisting I'd verbally intimidated her. The judge asked for proof. They had none. The tension in Fiona's stance was palpable, like she realized all her angles had collapsed. Meanwhile, Carla subtly slid a document across the table, a copy of the corporate inquiry into Damon's potential fraud, under seal, but available if needed. Fiona's lawyer blanched. He whispered furiously with Fiona, who shook her head in frustration. The judge cleared her throat. Based on what I've seen, the trust appears valid, and the fault for the marriage dissolution primarily lies with Mrs. Reed's extramarital relationship. Therefore, her claim to spousal support is weak. I'm inclined to deny it unless new evidence arises. Fiona's expression twisted in shock. Her lawyer raised a weak protest, but the judge silenced him with a pointed stare. You can file an appeal, but unless you show cause, I see no reason to overturn the trust or force spousal support on Mr. Reed. Just like that, the nightmare seemed to be unraveling in my favor. The judge suggested we finalize the divorce terms with minimal financial compensation, essentially dividing any jointly owned items but excluding the house. Fiona would walk away with whatever personal savings she had left, plus intangible stuff like personal belongings. Carla met my gaze, a satisfied glint in her eye. We'd accomplished what we came for. The judge adjourned, giving us a brief period to wrap up the paperwork. Outside the hearing room, Fiona lingered in the hallway, her eyes flickering between anger and something akin to regret. Approaching her was awkward, but I felt compelled to say something. So that's it, I said softly, stuffing my hands in my pockets. She looked at me, pain etched in her features. Guess so. You got what you wanted. I stiffened. What I wanted? You think I wanted any of this? She swallowed hard, glancing at the floor. Damon was supposed to give me a better life, but everything's messed up. I never meant... I cut her off gently, no malice in my tone. You made your choice, Fiona. I'm not gloating, but I'm not apologizing either. Her eyes shone with tears for a moment. Then she straightened, drawing in a sharp breath. Without another word, she turned and strode away, her lawyer in tow. Carla appeared beside me, resting a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You did well, she said softly. Divorce judgment should be finalized soon. Might just need your signature on a few documents next week. I exhaled, the hollow feeling in my chest surprising me. Victory felt strange. Thank you, Carla. Really. She smiled, nodding. Call me if you need anything else. Then she headed off, leaving me alone in the hallway. For a moment, I stood there, absorbing the reality that the last 5 years of my marriage had ended on a piece of official paper. Fiona was gone, her new life in tatters alongside Damon's. I was free, but the emptiness pressed in. After a while, I pulled out my phone, texted James a simple message. Divorce hearing over. Went in my favor. He replied with a string of celebratory emojis. I mustered a small grin, slipped my phone away, and walked outside into the afternoon sun. The news spread quickly through our circle Andrew Reed was officially divorced, and Fiona Reed's attempt at claiming alimony or trust assets had failed. People whispered about Damon's crumbling finances. Some took pity on Fiona, others outright avoided her. Even Ethan and Harriet Gray maintained a conspicuous distance. The social backlash was worse than I'd anticipated, with folks labeling Fiona the woman who bet on the wrong man. A few days later, I got a call that sealed Damon Price's fate. He was arrested under suspicion of fraud and embezzlement. The charges weren't final, but the corporation had handed over enough evidence for local prosecutors to proceed. When I heard it through James, I simply nodded, emotions swirling in my chest. My revenge was practically complete, yet I didn't feel the triumphant fireworks I'd once expected. Instead, there was just a quiet sense of closure. Shortly after, I stepped into my office one morning to find an envelope waiting on my desk. The sender was unknown, but the handwriting looked rushed. Inside, there was a single sheet. "Are you happy now? You destroyed us both." No signature, but I recognized the tone Fiona, presumably. I stared at the page, heart heavy. Destroyed them? They'd done plenty on their own. I refused to let guilt hijack me. Work became my refuge in those days. The local press ran stories about Damon's indictment, labeling him a high-flying finance exec turned suspect. If anyone suspected my involvement in exposing him, no one said it out loud. My clients kept me busy with year-end audits and new accounts, and James handled the occasional curious question with vague shrugs. Amidst this swirl of finality, a sliver of warmth entered my life. Late one Tuesday, Elizabeth Myers, a friend of James's, stopped by the firm to discuss some bookkeeping issues for her small design business. She was soft-spoken, with an easygoing smile and keen eyes that suggested she missed very little. I'd met her briefly once, but I barely remembered the encounter. Now she carried a neat file of receipts and bank statements, asking for advice on reorganizing her finances. After finishing the consultation, Elizabeth lingered a moment outside my office door. "Andrew Reed, right?" she asked, as though double-checking. I nodded, offering a polite smile. "That's me. Hope the advice helped." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "It did. Thanks." James said, "Well, he mentioned you'd had a rough time lately. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." There was genuine kindness in her gaze, free from the pity I sometimes saw in acquaintances who'd heard about my divorce. I felt a flare of self-consciousness. "I appreciate that, but I'm recovering. Life moves on." Elizabeth gave a gentle nod. "Good. If you ever need a fresh perspective on design or even just a chat, I'm around. Sometimes a neutral voice can help." That simple offer struck me as unexpectedly comforting. "Thank you," I replied, and meant it. She left, and James poked his head around the corner, grinning. "She's nice, huh?" he teased. I shook my head, rolling my eyes playfully. "Don't push it, James." But inside, something stirred a tiny flicker of interest I hadn't felt in a long time. As the weeks went by, I continued working, rebuilding, and finalizing the divorce paperwork. Carla confirmed that Fiona's settlement was minimal. She got her personal items and whatever small savings she had in our joint checking before I canceled it. The house and my business remained firmly under my control. The official decree arrived by mail one Tuesday afternoon, a plain envelope sealing 5 years of marriage with a stamped signature. I read it alone in my living room, feeling both free and strangely numb. Just when I thought life might settle into a predictable new normal, Harriet unexpectedly reached out to me, apologizing for everything, claiming her own marriage was on the rocks. I kept my distance, politely stating that I didn't hold a grudge but couldn't pretend nothing happened. She sounded disappointed, but I couldn't offer more. In quiet moments, I reflected on how drastically life had changed. Damon faced criminal charges. Fiona was ostracized, left with no easy financial windfall. The people who had once laughed with me now whispered behind my back, unsure how to treat a man whose wife left him in such a public, scandalous way. Yet I felt at peace knowing I had protected myself. I wasn't the naive husband they once saw. One late afternoon, after signing the final divorce documents at Carla's office, I stepped outside into a crisp breeze. The sun angled low, highlighting the city's skyline in gold. As I headed toward my car, I noticed Elizabeth Myers standing by a coffee cart on the sidewalk, sipping a latte. She caught sight of me and lifted her cup in a friendly salute. I wandered over, and she offered me a warm smile. "Fancy meeting you here? Business downtown?" I gestured to the law office behind me. "Wrapped up some personal paperwork." "You?" Elizabeth laughed lightly. "Just grabbing coffee between meetings with my design clients. Want one? My treat." Part of me wanted to decline out of habit life, had me on guard, but a stronger part said it was okay to accept small kindnesses. "Sure, thanks," I said quietly. We chatted about her design projects, my accounting work, and random city life tidbits. She had this calming presence, a stark contrast to all the turmoil I'd been through. Sipping the coffee she bought me, I felt a glimmer of hope. For the first time since Fiona's betrayal, I sensed that the dark cloud looming over my life was drifting away. The divorce was done. Damon faced the consequences of his crimes, and I was slowly re-entering the world on my own terms. As Elizabeth and I parted ways, she flashed me a gentle smile. "Take care, Andrew. I guess I'll see you around." I smiled back, feeling genuine warmth spread in my chest. "Yeah, see you around." That evening, I drove home under a lavender sky, radio playing softly. The emptiness in my house still hit me whenever I stepped inside, but now it felt more like a blank canvas than a tomb of memories. With Damon's downfall complete and Fiona's attempts to grab my assets thwarted, I could finally breathe. I settled on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through texts. Carla had just confirmed that everything was official. The court recognized the divorce. Fiona had no legal hold on me. A final wave of relief washed through me. Yes, I was alone, the last 5 years left behind in a swirl of heartbreak and vengeance, but the future felt open. The hush in the living room wasn't so suffocating anymore. Somewhere far off, I heard the faint rumble of traffic, the city continuing its endless hustle. Within me, the bitterness slowly ebbed, replaced by a cautious optimism. Maybe, just maybe, life would be okay and possibly even better than before. I couldn't predict what lay ahead, but as I glanced at a simple business card Elizabeth Myers had handed me her design studio's info scrawled in neat cursive, I caught myself smiling, a small spark of curiosity lighting up my thoughts. For the first time, I believed there really could be a tomorrow worth looking forward to. Morning light filtered through the blinds of Andrew Reed's bedroom, softer than usual and oddly reassuring. It had been a few weeks since he finalized his divorce from Fiona, and life was beginning to settle into a quiet rhythm. Nothing flashy, just a comfortable routine that felt healthier than the chaos he'd endured. He rose at 6, brushed his teeth in front of a mirror that no longer reminded him of Fiona's abandoned makeup bag, and threw on running shoes for a quick jog around the block. He'd never been much of a runner before, but these days the steady rhythm of his feet on the pavement helped clear his head. That morning the neighborhood was still, the sky a delicate pink, and each inhale of crisp air felt like cleansing breath for his soul. By 7:30, he was at his kitchen table, sipping coffee and checking emails on his laptop. His accountant's mind zeroed in on client updates, ensuring he had no surprises in store for the day. As he scrolled, a small pang of relief came over him. No messages from lawyers, no frantic calls about Fiona. The legal battles were behind him. For the first time in months, the sense of impending doom had lifted. He arrived at Reed Accounting a little before 9. In the hallway, he bumped into James Parker, who offered a quick grin. "You look more relaxed," James observed, his eyes flicking over Andrew's face. "Been sleeping better?" Andrew nodded. "Actually, yeah. Feels strange not worrying about court dates." James gave him a friendly pat on the shoulder. "I still remember how tense you were a couple months back. It's good seeing you like this. Shows you handled everything the right way." There was a note of pride in his voice, as though Andrew were a younger brother who'd just overcome a major hurdle. They headed to Andrew's office, where James updated him on a few new client leads. "All that talk about the Damon Price scandal put your name on the radar," he said, dropping a folder on the desk. "It's not the kind of publicity we usually chase, but some small businesses saw your firm's integrity in action." Andrew managed a small smile, recalling how Damon's wrongdoing had inadvertently boosted Reed Accounting's profile. "Well, I'll take the silver lining," he said, flipping through the folder. A handful of local companies were asking for audits or financial consultations work that promised growth for his firm. "Just remember," James added, leaning against the desk, "you can't keep carrying around resentment. You won, Andrew. The best thing you can do is let the bitterness go." Andrew exhaled, nodding slowly. James was right, even if letting go wasn't easy. The rage and sense of betrayal had fueled him for so long, it felt almost unnatural to release it. But he'd come to realize that holding on would keep him stuck in the same emotional loop. By midday, Andrew found himself breezing through calls with potential clients. Even his staff noticed the shift in his demeanor, more open, less guarded. A few folks teased him about looking so chill. Andrew simply shrugged it off, grateful not to be recognized as the scorned husband anymore. Toward late afternoon, a soft knock sounded at his office door. He glanced up from his computer to see Elizabeth Myers, the small business owner he'd recently helped with some bookkeeping issues. She wore a casual blazer over a floral blouse, carrying a neat binder under one arm. "Hey there," she said warmly. "I hope I'm not interrupting. James told me you'd be free around 4. Andrew closed his laptop, waving her in. "Sure, come on in. Everything all right with your design firm's numbers?" She nodded, crossing the room. "Actually, yes. I just had a few follow-up questions." The faint hum of the overhead fluorescent lights filled the quiet office as Elizabeth settled into a chair. "Also, I wanted to thank you. Your advice last time really simplified my invoicing process." Andrew felt a subtle warmth inside, a different sort of satisfaction than winning a courtroom showdown. "Glad to hear it. Sometimes small tweaks go a long way." As they talked through her queries, he found himself appreciating not just her business approach, but the calm empathy that seemed to radiate from her. She listened intently, responded thoughtfully, and never once made him feel like a spectacle. After concluding the consultation, they lingered, chatting about random bits of the city-hidden coffee shops, an upcoming local arts festival. Eventually, Elizabeth rose to leave, binder tucked under her arm. "By the way," she said, a light hesitation in her tone, "James mentioned you're exploring a new routine jogging, maybe a little painting on weekends." Andrew gave a self-conscious laugh. "He's not supposed to broadcast my midlife hobbies." She smiled, warm and genuine. "Nothing wrong with hobbies. If you ever want someone to do a casual run with, let me know. I'm no marathoner, but I love a decent jog." Her invitation caught Andrew off guard. He recalled the early morning runs that had become his stress relief. Running with someone else that felt oddly intimate, but also kind of nice. "Thanks, I'll keep that in mind." With a friendly wave, she headed out, leaving Andrew feeling surprisingly buoyant. This was a stark contrast to the storm he'd weathered. He couldn't help but compare the easy conversation with Elizabeth to the strained tension he used to feel with Fiona. That thought pinched a small nerve he didn't want to constantly measure one woman against another. Still, caution was warranted. He'd been betrayed once. Trusting again would take time. Before leaving the office, he got a text from James. "Hey, grabbing a drink at the rail bar after work. You in?" Andrew hesitated, then replied, "Sure. See you there at 6. Socializing felt like another step toward normalcy. At the rail bar, a modest neighborhood spot with exposed brick walls and comfy stools, Andrew sipped a light beer and listened to James recount an old college story. The place bustled with the after-work crowd, but Andrew felt a sense of calm. No one recognized him as the cheated-on guy. He was just Andrew, having a drink with a friend. Halfway through the conversation, James took a more serious turn. "I might have suggested to Elizabeth that she say hi," James admitted, swirling his glass. "Hope that's okay. I can see she's got a bit of an interest, but no pressure." Andrew looked down at his beer, half smiling. "It's fine, she's nice, not pushy. Honestly, I appreciate her vibe. Might be good to have someone new to talk to about normal stuff." James raised his glass. "Amen to that. You deserve it." They parted around 8, leaving Andrew with a warm sense of possibility swirling in his chest. As he pulled into his driveway, he realized the house no longer felt like a crypt. That hollow loneliness was giving way to something else, hope, maybe. He stepped inside, flicked on the lamp, and noted the stack of mail on the counter, all mundane. No lawyer letters, no frantic demands. Exhaling contentedly, he sank onto the couch. The echoes of Fiona's betrayal still lingered at the edges of his thoughts, but they didn't hold the same power anymore. James was right. He'd gotten through the worst. Now it was time to embrace whatever new path lay ahead. The next few weeks passed in a gentle progression. Andrew's accounting practice thrived, partly because some local newspapers indirectly credited his ethical diligence in uncovering aspects of Damon's fraud. While no one publicly named Reed Accounting as the whistleblower, word of mouth worked wonders in the small business community. At least once a day, Andrew paused in his office, realizing how unexpected this boon was. He'd set out purely to protect himself from Damon and Fiona's treachery, never expecting new clients to pop up. When people asked for details, Andrew offered polite smiles and minimal answers. He didn't want to sensationalize the story. One late afternoon, he found himself in the break room with James, flipping through a portfolio from a promising client who sold eco-friendly packaging. The potential contract looked bigger than Andrew ever dared to dream a few months ago. "This'll put us on the map," James remarked, brow raised. "You comfortable scaling up? Means hiring more staff, maybe renting a bigger space." Andrew took a moment, sipping from his water bottle. "I think so. It's a good problem to have, right?" James laughed. "Absolutely. By the way, how's everything on the personal front? Heard you've been texting with Elizabeth?" Andrew felt a flicker of embarrassment. "We've traded a few messages, yeah. She actually swung by the other day to talk about design stuff. We ended up grabbing coffee afterward. Nothing major." James gave him a knowing look. "Hey, I'm just glad you're talking to someone who's not trying to sue or scam you." Andrew smirked, shaking his head. True. He thought back to the conversation he'd had with Elizabeth. They'd sat in a sunlit cafe, chatting about her design projects, his new clients, and random city events. It was easy. No tense undercurrent, no guarded half-truths. He told himself it was just friendship, and maybe that was enough for now. That night, Andrew returned home to find a voicemail from Harriet Gray. The apologetic tone in her voice indicated she wasn't just calling about small talk. "Andrew, hi, it's Harriet. I know you might not want to talk, but things are rough with Ethan. I guess I'm hoping maybe I can ask for your advice? Or at least hear me out?" He stood in his living room, phone in hand, a swirl of conflicting emotions rising. Harriet had once been complicit in Fiona's scheme. On the other hand, Harriet wasn't the main betrayer, she'd mostly been a bystander, albeit a weak one. After a moment, Andrew decided to text her. "Sorry about your situation. I'm not comfortable with personal advice. Best of luck." Polite, yet distant, maintaining boundaries. Early the next morning, as Andrew finished a short jog, he saw Elizabeth's car pull up at the curb in front of his house. She hopped out wearing running shoes and a light jacket, a playful grin on her face. "Hey, you mentioned a morning run. Figured I'd join for a mile or two if you don't mind." Surprised, Andrew managed to smile. "Sure, I'm about done, though." She shrugged. "That's okay. Maybe next time shoot me a text. I'm always looking for an excuse to get moving." They ended up strolling a couple of blocks instead, cooling down. The neighborhood was quiet, the morning sun soft over the rows of tidy lawns. As they walked, Elizabeth's presence felt calming. She asked about his day, teased him lightly about skipping breakfast. Conversation flowed so naturally that Andrew nearly forgot the old pain he'd carried. Once they looped back to Andrew's place, she gave him a friendly pat on the arm. "You look good, you know. Like someone who's ready to live again." Heat rose in Andrew's cheeks. "Working on it," he admitted. "Thanks for the walk. Next time I'll actually run with you." "Deal," Elizabeth said, heading back to her car. "Don't stand me up." Later that afternoon at work, Andrew mulled over Harriet's predicament. Part of him wondered if Ethan and Harriet's marriage was unraveling because of guilt over Fiona's betrayal. Another part felt he had no business meddling. He'd spent too long tangling with other people's drama. He got his answer when Harriet herself showed up at the firm around 3 o'clock. The receptionist, unsure what to do, let her in. She hovered by Andrew's office door, face etched with worry. "Can I talk to you for just a minute, Andrew?" she pleaded quietly. Reluctance weighed on him, but he gestured for her to step inside. He kept the door open, a subtle signal he wasn't aiming for a private heart-to-heart. Harriet smoothed her hair, eyes darting around as though searching for hidden cameras. "I know we haven't been on good terms," she began, voice trembling. "But I'm in a mess, Andrew. Ethan, we're on the brink. And I can't help feeling our involvement with Fiona made things worse. I wanted to say I'm sorry about everything." Andrew felt the old anger flicker but kept his tone measured. "I appreciate the apology, Harriet, but I can't fix your marriage. You made your choices. So did Ethan." Tears glistened in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you. Fiona, we thought she just needed support. None of us imagined that mess at the club. She paused, swallowing hard. Anyway, Ethan blames me for not warning you sooner. We fight constantly. I feel lost. A pang of pity nudged Andrew's chest, but he reminded himself of the boundaries he'd set. Look, he said softly, I'm sorry you're going through this, but I'm not a counselor. Maybe you guys should see a professional. Harriet nodded, looking deflated yet somewhat relieved at his calm response. All right, just thanks for letting me say my piece. With that, she left, shoulders slumped. Andrew released a slow breath, tension easing from his spine. He felt no triumph in her misery, only a distant sadness. Sometimes the ripple effect of betrayal injured bystanders, too. That evening, as if on cue, Elizabeth texted him. Up for a casual dinner tomorrow? Nothing fancy, just a local diner, if you're free. Andrew stared at his phone for a full minute, contemplating. Had he recovered enough to risk moving forward with someone new? The thought of an actual date tensed his gut, but a calmer voice reminded him that not everyone was Fiona. Sure, he typed back, heart pounding. Let's do it. In bed that night, Andrew reflected on the swirl of changes. Harriet's visit underscored how the past could still haunt him, while Elizabeth's invitation symbolized a step into the future. With the divorce behind him and Damon's fraud out of his life, maybe it was time to fully reconnect with the world. Sleep came more easily these days, and he drifted off imagining a simpler, kinder tomorrow. Friday evening found Andrew sitting in a cozy booth at Silver Spoon Diner, an unassuming place with checkered floors and bright neon signs. The smell of fried chicken mingled with fresh coffee, and the hum of low conversation filled the space. Across from him, Elizabeth Myers offered a relaxed smile, stirring her lemonade. This place is cute, she said, glancing around. Reminds me of a spot back in my hometown. Andrew nodded, trying to hide the slight flutter of nerves in his stomach. He wasn't sure if this counted as a formal date. Elizabeth had called it casual, but he felt the undercurrent of possibility. He studied her face in the warm light, noticing how genuinely engaged she seemed, no hidden agendas or walls. They talked about her design business, how she'd started it from a small online portfolio. Andrew shared a bit about his firm's growth, omitting the messy details of Damon's downfall but admitting there'd been a recent surge of interest. Elizabeth's laughter came easily when he joked about nearly drowning in spreadsheets. After finishing their meals, the conversation dipped into personal territory. Not painfully deep, but enough that Andrew felt a twinge in his chest. He couldn't ignore Fiona's specter forever. He gave a brief overview of the divorce, speaking in subdued tones. I'm sorry you went through that, Elizabeth said quietly, eyes empathetic. Betrayal, it cuts deep, but you seem stronger now. Andrew exhaled, relieved she wasn't prying for lurid details. It's been a process. I had a lot of anger, still do sometimes, but I'm working on it. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. If you ever need to vent, like truly vent, I can handle it. I know we're not super close yet, but I understand heartbreak. Her gaze flickered with understanding, as though she'd endured her own pains. A gentle warmth flowed through Andrew. I appreciate that, he said. Maybe I'll take you up on it sometime. They chatted for another hour, sharing stories of teenage embarrassments, random high school anecdotes. Andrew found himself genuinely enjoying every minute, noticing how the tension in his chest had eased. By the time they parted outside the diner, the sky had grown dark and the air crisp. Elizabeth gave him a quick, friendly hug, a gesture that felt both comforting and electric. On the drive home, Andrew replayed the evening, part of him marveling at how normal it felt. For so long, normal had been overshadowed by secrecy, anger, and heartbreak. Now, with a woman who simply appreciated good food and honest conversation, he saw a glimpse of what a healthy connection might look like. Later that weekend, he mustered the courage to schedule a therapist appointment. Though he'd confided in James, Andrew realized professional guidance could help him process the last few months. On Monday morning, he found himself in a tranquil office with soft lighting, describing his emotional journey to Dr. Melanie Brooks, a poised, calm-voiced psychologist. Part of me is still furious, Andrew admitted, fingers fidgeting with the cuff of his shirt. Furious at Fiona for betraying me, furious at myself for not seeing it, but another part just wants to move on. Dr. Brooks nodded thoughtfully. Anger can be a protective shield, especially after betrayal. It served a purpose, helped you survive, but it can also keep you trapped if you rely on it too long. Andrew considered that. I guess I clung to it because it propelled me to fight back, to protect myself. She offered a gentle smile. And that fight was valid. But now that you've won those battles, secured your assets, ended the marriage, maybe the anger's job is done? He let that sink in. The idea of relinquishing anger felt both liberating and a little scary. What if letting go means I'll be vulnerable again? Dr. Brooks's expression was empathetic. Healing does involve vulnerability, but it also frees you to live fully. Your next challenge is trusting yourself enough to handle whatever comes next. He left the appointment feeling lighter, as if a subtle weight had been lifted. No one had told him to suppress or forget what happened, just to acknowledge that he didn't need to stay in battle mode forever. Maybe letting himself explore new relationships or new joys didn't betray his past suffering. That mindset shift came in handy when news broke that Damon's trial was scheduled for a preliminary hearing soon. The local press picked up the story, referencing fraud and embezzlement. Fiona's name popped up in rumors, though not officially charged with any wrongdoing. Andrew read the headlines, realized he felt no rush of vindictive excitement. He'd gotten what he needed. Damon's troubles were Damon's alone. Elizabeth texted him the same evening the news hit, a simple, "You okay?" He replied with a picture of him casually flipping through a magazine about interior design, half smiling. The subtext was clear. He was fine, not consumed by the drama anymore. A few days later, while Andrew was working late at the office, he got a surprise visitor, Harriet Gray, again. She looked worse for wear, eyes puffy, hair unkempt. Apologizing for the intrusion, she blurted out that Ethan had left her, and she needed some advice about her finances. Andrew forced himself to remain calm. He spent a few minutes giving Harriet basic budget tips. Though she tried steering the talk to personal regrets, Andrew politely but firmly kept the conversation professional. In the end, Harriet sighed, thanked him, and departed. Alone in his office, Andrew felt a pang of empathy but no inclination to get entangled in Harriet's marital woes. He quietly reflected that his own healing process at least allowed him to keep boundaries now, not feeling obliged to fix others. That evening, he and Elizabeth met for a quick dinner at a new ramen place. Over steaming bowls of savory broth, they shared small successes of the week: Elizabeth's design pitch to a local boutique, Andrew signing a fresh audit client. This easy companionship offered a soft solace he never realized he'd missed. After dinner, Andrew walked her to her car. The parking lot was nearly empty, the air carrying a faint hint of summer warmth. She paused at her driver's side door, turned to face him. "I like talking to you," she said, her voice gentle. "Feels safe." Andrew's heart thudded. "I feel the same." A beat of silence stretched between them, electric with unspoken possibilities. He considered leaning in for a kiss but hesitated, unsure if the moment was right. Elizabeth sensed the hesitation and broke the tension with a light smile. "It's okay," she murmured, laying a hand on his arm. "We don't have to rush." Relief washed over him. "Thanks. I guess I'm still reacclimating." She nodded, stepping back. "One day at a time, Andrew. Just know I'm here, however slow or fast you want to go." He smiled, touched by her patience, and watched her drive off. Leaning against his own car, Andrew gazed at the dimly lit sky, noticing a single bright star overhead. The path he was on felt uncertain but hopeful he could let go of the last shards of bitterness, take those steps toward genuine connection, and trust he wouldn't crumble again. Morning sun leaked through Andrew's blinds as he stood in his living room, sipping coffee. His gaze traveled over the walls and furniture. The place had become a haven, clean, orderly, and no longer haunted by memories of Fiona's sudden departure. Yet a subtle itch in the back of his mind told him a fresh start might require more than just an emotional reset. That thought lingered as he drove to the office, meeting James for a quick stand-up meeting about new hires. The firm was expanding, and they needed at least 2 additional accountants. Andrew flicked through resumes as they sat in the conference room. James paused mid-discussion, eyeing Andrew. "Ever thought about remodeling your house?" Or maybe selling and moving to a bigger place. You seem unsettled. Andrew rubbed his neck. The notion had crossed his mind. I was just thinking about that, actually. Might be time for a change. I love my house, but it holds a lot of old baggage. James nodded sympathetically. Renovation or selling could help you let go of the ghosts. No rush, but keep it in mind. After the meeting, Andrew spent the day juggling client calls. Late in the afternoon, he found a moment to text Elizabeth. Random question. How do you feel about interior redesign? She replied almost instantly, Love it. Why? That single word made him grin. He explained the idea of renovating, maybe brightening the living room, changing the bedroom layout, anything to reflect the new phase of his life. Elizabeth seemed enthusiastic, offering to brainstorm. By evening, they were sitting on Andrew's couch with design magazines spread out, tossing around ideas. The chatter felt intimate yet fun, and Andrew found himself marveling at how easily she fit into the space. At one point, Elizabeth hesitated, glancing from the magazine to his face. Have you thought about me staying over sometimes? Maybe not moving in, but, seeing how we cohabit for a weekend? Her voice was careful, not wanting to push. Andrew's heart thumped. The concept of sharing his home with someone again made him both excited and nervous. I'd like that, he admitted, forcing a confident tone. I'm cautious, but you already know that. She reached out, lightly intertwining her fingers with his. I appreciate your honesty. We can go at your speed. But I care about you, Andrew, and I want to see where this leads. His chest fluttered, that tender admission stirring hope. They spent the next hour happily debating paint colors. She advocated a serene coastal palette. He found himself leaning toward warm earth tones. Eventually, they compromised on something in between, laughing at how domestic it all felt. A few days later, Andrew began quietly removing old decorations and clutter associated with his past life. He hauled boxes to a local charity, dropping off items he no longer needed. It wasn't about erasing his history, it was about embracing the person he was now. During one late-night text exchange, Elizabeth ventured another question. Would you ever want to consider marriage again? Not now, obviously, but in the future? Andrew's breath caught. He stared at the screen, the idea both dizzying and oddly appealing. He typed back carefully, I'm not ruling it out. Scares me a bit, but I'm open if it's right. She responded with a simple heart emoji, and that quiet gesture spoke volumes about their mutual understanding. Meanwhile, Andrew touched base with a real estate contact for opinions on whether to renovate or sell. The feedback was straightforward. The house was in good shape, but a well-planned renovation could raise its value significantly. Andrew weighed the pros and cons. A big part of him considered selling outright, starting fresh somewhere that carried no echoes of betrayal. Yet he also felt a stubborn desire to transform the old place into something purely his own. In the midst of these contemplations, life moved on at the firm. Andrew and James brought 2 new accountants aboard, both eager and talented. The hustle of training them kept Andrew's mind busy. He discovered a renewed sense of mentorship, helping younger professionals find their footing in the world of finance. This sense of building something meaningful further cemented his new outlook. On a mild Saturday morning, Elizabeth popped by with a small duffel bag, planning to stay the weekend as a trial run. Andrew's nerves buzzed. Even though it was just 2 nights, the symbolism felt huge. They cooked dinner together, her recipe for lemon garlic chicken, his side dish of roasted vegetables. The act of sharing the kitchen, blending ingredients, and chatting about everything from childhood memories to future career dreams felt surprisingly harmonious. That evening after dinner, they curled up on the couch to watch a movie. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and Andrew caught a scent of her light floral perfume. The closeness was comforting, not tinged with suspicion or guardedness. When she eventually fell asleep against him, he allowed himself a moment to reflect on how far he'd come from devastation to a slow, cautious opening of his heart. Before bed, Elizabeth gently brought up the topic of marriage again, this time in a more playful tone. You sure you can handle me hogging half your closet if we ever got that far? Andrew laughed, the question not sparking the panic it once might have. We'd figure it out, he said simply, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. Later, lying awake in the dimly lit bedroom, Andrew stared at the faint shadows on the ceiling. The old ghost of Fiona no longer lurked at the edges of his mind. Instead, he felt a quiet confidence. He'd survived the worst heartbreak, exacted his revenge, and found a measure of peace. Now, with Elizabeth, he had a chance to build something real. It scared him, but the fear no longer paralyzed him. He recognized that risk was part of growth. In the morning, as the sun shone through the curtains, Andrew woke to Elizabeth's gentle stirring beside him. She offered a sleepy smile, and he returned it, warmth flooding his chest. Part of him knew they still had a journey ahead, lots of conversation, the possibility of stumbling blocks. Yet the overarching feeling was one of being on the cusp of a fresh beginning, not just with Elizabeth, but with life as a whole. He resolved to finalize a decision about the house. Whether by renovation or sale, he'd ensure the old ghosts were replaced by new, hopeful memories. Another small step toward liberation, one he felt ready to take. As Elizabeth brewed coffee in his kitchen that day, humming softly, Andrew leaned against the doorframe, letting the aroma and her presence fill him with contentment. This was the sign that he was no longer trapped by bitterness. There was a future, maybe even a marriage down the line, if that's where life led. He still had moments of doubt, but with each passing day, doubt gave way to quiet optimism. Sunlight spilled across Andrew Reed's desk at Reed and Parker Accounting, illuminating family photos, motivational quotes, and neat piles of financial reports. He had come a long way. It had been roughly 4 years since the chaos of his divorce from Fiona and the subsequent uproar. Now, life felt surprisingly calm, steady even. The metal plate on his door read, Andrew Reed, Managing Partner, and next to it was another sign for James Parker, newly minted partner. Their firm had expanded, occupying an entire floor in a modern downtown building. Andrew leaned back in his chair, letting out a small sigh of contentment. He was waiting for a lunch meeting with a prospective client, but his mind wandered to how different everything was. He was married now. Elizabeth had become Mrs. Reed about 1.5 years ago, and the transformation in his life was remarkable. Where once there had been tension, heartbreak, and rage, there was now peace and shared ambition. A knock at the door snapped him from his thoughts. James popped in, wearing a crisp suit and a relaxed grin. Hey, our new potential client will be here in 5. You ready? Andrew smiled. Absolutely. He stood, smoothing his shirt. After this, let's grab coffee. I want your opinion on something personal, house hunting, maybe. James's eyebrows lifted. Finally thinking of moving out of your old place? Andrew shrugged. Elizabeth and I talked about finding a property with more outdoor space. We've been comfortable in the renovated house, but we're open to new horizons. James gave an approving nod. Progress. Good for you, man. Not long after, the client arrived, a mid-sized tech company seeking a new auditing firm. Andrew and James led them to the conference room, their easy teamwork showcasing how well they complemented each other's strengths. The meeting wrapped smoothly, with the client promising to forward the contract by week's end. Later, once the hush of lunchtime settled in, Andrew and James headed to a bustling cafe across the street. While they sipped lattes, the conversation turned more personal. So, James began, stirring sugar into his cup. Hard to believe it's been, 4 years since everything blew up? Andrew nodded, a faint bittersweet smile on his lips. Yeah, sometimes it feels like another lifetime. Other times it's like it was yesterday. James took a thoughtful pause. You've built an incredible life since then. The firm's thriving. You and Elizabeth are solid. Gotta be proud. I am, Andrew said. He noticed a few younger office workers glancing over, presumably recognizing them from local business events. He didn't mind he'd grown used to the mild attention. Sometimes I think about Fiona. Wonder where she ended up. Haven't heard anything in a long while. James shrugged. Rumors pop up occasionally. Last I heard, she was bouncing between jobs or something. But nobody's certain. Andrew accepted that with a small nod. A fleeting pang touched his chest. Memories of betrayal still stung, but they no longer defined him. He loved Elizabeth wholeheartedly. The skeletons of the past rarely rattled him these days. After lunch, they strolled back to the office in comfortable silence, enjoying the midday sun. Andrew parted ways with James at the elevator, returning to his office to review a couple of client proposals. Around 3, his phone buzzed with a text from Elizabeth. "Any chance you can leave early today? House hunting online is driving me nuts. We could tour a place I found in Maplewood at 4:30. A grin tugged at Andrew's lips. Maplewood was known for its big yards and quiet streets, which Elizabeth adored. He texted back, "Count me in. Meet you there at 4:30. The property turned out to be a charming 2-story with a wraparound porch and a sunny backyard. Andrew and Elizabeth spent half an hour discussing potential renovations, imagining where they'd place the furniture, how they might host barbecues in the yard. Elizabeth's excitement was infectious, though Andrew still carried traces of caution. He'd learned that life could turn upside down at any moment, but her optimism was slowly eroding his wariness. "That smile on your face," Elizabeth teased as they walked back to their cars. "You really like this place, huh?" Andrew slipped an arm around her waist. "It's nice. You see yourself living here?" She nodded, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I do. Feels like a real family home." Andrew's heartbeat quickened. Family. They'd talked about starting one, though no concrete timeline had been set. The thought of having kids in a house that wasn't haunted by old memories felt strangely right. He pressed a soft kiss to her temple. "Let's see if we can negotiate a good price, yeah?" "Deal," she said, eyes shining. Back at their current home, Andrew settled at the dining room table with Elizabeth, scanning a property listing on her laptop. The smell of homemade soup wafted from the kitchen. Their routine was comfortable, an easy partnership that soothed any lingering scars from the past. Later, as they relaxed on the couch, Elizabeth resting her feet in his lap, Andrew flicked through local news on his tablet. A small headline caught his eye. "Local woman's financial struggles spark debate on housing costs." The photo attached it took him a moment to recognize the weary features, but it was undeniably Fiona. Andrew's breath stilled. He tapped the article, reading about a woman who'd lost her job, struggled with rent, and was seeking public assistance. The piece didn't mention Fiona by name, only calling her F.R. But the photo spoke volumes. Andrew's stomach churned with conflicting feelings. Pity, relief, it wasn't him, and a pang of guilt for feeling relief at all. Elizabeth, noticing his sudden tension, lightly squeezed his hand. "Everything okay?" He swallowed. I might have stumbled on something about Fiona. She's apparently in a rough place." Elizabeth's expression softened. She slid closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "That's got to stir up a lot for you." Andrew stared at the article's photo. "It does. Part of me hates that I'm not more upset. Another part thinks, well, it's what she chose." Elizabeth's arms encircled him in a comforting hug. "You can't fix her life. She made decisions. You did what you had to do. It's okay to feel conflicted." Andrew exhaled, tension easing. He set the tablet aside, letting Elizabeth's presence ground him in the present. Whatever Fiona's fate, he had no immediate obligation to step in. Still, the memory of that once cherished bond tugged at a corner of his mind. He forced a small smile. "Thanks," he murmured. "I guess hearing that she's struggling, it's a reminder that the past never completely disappears, you know?" Elizabeth kissed his cheek softly. "It doesn't. But you're stronger now, Andrew." He nodded. The supportive glow in her eyes reminded him how fortunate he was. He had love, stability, a future that no longer hinged on bitterness. Fiona's downfall might have been inevitable, but it wasn't his responsibility to mend or deepen that wound. That night, Andrew slept peacefully, a subtle whisper in his dreams urging him forward, not backward. A crisp autumn breeze rustled the trees outside Andrew's office window the following week. Leaves had begun their slow shift to gold and red, painting the city in a warm palette. Andrew was finalizing a client's financial statements when his phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. He almost ignored it, but an odd pull made him check. "Andrew, it's Fiona. Please, I need help." His heart jolted. In all these years, she hadn't once reached out directly. He stared at the screen, mind swirling with half-formed thoughts. He took a slow breath, forcing calm. Finally, he tapped out a response. "What do you want?" Her reply came quickly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm desperate. Could we meet? Just talk? Andrew's stomach clenched. Meeting Fiona after everything? He clenched his jaw, typed carefully, "I'll think about it. Let me know where." For a few minutes he sat there, phone in hand, grappling with the surge of old emotions. In the hallway, James passed by, noticing Andrew's distracted look. "You good?" he asked casually. Andrew hesitated, then nodded. "Fiona texted me. She wants to meet." James's brow furrowed. "Wow, that's unexpected. You sure you want to go down that road?" Andrew shrugged, rubbing his temple. "She's in trouble, apparently. Elizabeth always says if I need closure, I might have to face some old wounds." James patted his shoulder. "Your call, man. Just protect yourself. Don't let her guilt trip you." That afternoon, Andrew found himself in a candid conversation with Elizabeth at their dinner table. He showed her the texts. She listened, eyes thoughtful. "If you feel like you need to see her to move on, or to confirm your boundaries, I support you. But don't let her manipulate you. You've come too far." Andrew reached for her hand. "Thank you. I'll be careful." They decided on a neutral spot, a public cafe in a part of town neither Andrew nor Fiona frequented. 2 days later, Andrew arrived at the small coffee shop. His pulse pounded as he spotted Fiona in the corner booth. She looked thin, weariness etched into her face. The once confident spark that had fueled her betrayal seemed extinguished. He slid into the booth across from her without offering a handshake or hug. "Fiona," he greeted quietly. She fidgeted with her coffee cup. "Andrew. Hi." For a moment she simply stared, as though seeing a stranger. "You look good." He nodded, not wanting small talk. "You said you needed help. I'm here to listen. That's all." A flash of hurt crossed her features, but she nodded. She admitted losing her job a few months back, struggling with rent, and being unable to secure steady work. She spoke vaguely about regrets, though she never fully named them. Andrew listened impassively, heart straining under the weight of memories. The club, Damon's smug grin, the legal battles. At one point, Fiona mustered the courage to say, "I'm sorry for everything, truly. I never realized how it would all fall apart with Damon." Andrew inhaled, controlling the swirl of emotions. "It was a lifetime ago," he managed. "You made your choices. So did I." She swallowed. "I know. And now I guess I hoped maybe you could, if not help financially, then at least talk to me. See if you can guide me to some stable ground?" Andrew's chest tightened with conflicting impulses, part compassion, part wariness. He recalled Elizabeth's advice, to remain kind but firm. "Fiona, I'm not your safety net. If you need a job, plenty of agencies can help. I run an accounting firm, not a rehab center for ex-wives." His tone wasn't cruel, just factual. She flinched but nodded slowly. "I understand," she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. I don't have anyone left, Andrew." He glanced away, guilt nibbling at him. "I'm sorry you're in that position," he said quietly. "But I can't fix your life. You burned those bridges." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the coffee shop seemed unnaturally loud around them. Finally, Fiona cleared her throat. "Could we at least keep in touch? I'd like to, not feel so alone." Andrew exhaled. He thought about Elizabeth's unwavering support, how healthy boundaries had liberated him from the anger. "Look, I'll give you some resource numbers, employment centers, counseling hotlines. Beyond that, I don't think it's wise to be in constant contact." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I guess that's fair." Inwardly, Andrew acknowledged how different he felt compared to years past. No burning rage, no desire to lash out. Just a clarity that their paths were no longer aligned. He scribbled a few contacts on a napkin, slid it across the table. "Best I can do," he said gently. Fiona wiped her eyes. "Thank you." She hesitated, as if wanting to say more, but only mustered, "You look happy." He offered a small, sad smile. "I am. Married now, to a wonderful woman." She swallowed, nodding. "Good. You deserve that." Andrew stood, the meeting clearly done. For a split second, Fiona reached out, but he took a step back. He gave her a polite nod, then turned and walked away. Outside, the crisp air struck him, and he inhaled deeply, releasing a storm of old tension. He'd faced her, offered the bare minimum of assistance without compromising himself. It felt like both a burden lifted and a final barrier to total closure. Later that evening at home, he recounted the encounter to Elizabeth, who stroked his arm supportively. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "You handled it with compassion but kept healthy boundaries." Andrew pressed a grateful kiss to her forehead. "I guess it was necessary. I'm done letting the past define me." And with that, the final tie to Fiona's drama seemed to fade. He'd done what he could, refused what he must, and accepted that some journeys are separate. The future felt more open than ever. 2 weeks later, Andrew found himself awake before dawn. He slipped out of bed quietly, not wanting to disturb Elizabeth, and padded into the living room. The house was still, only the soft hum of the refrigerator breaking the silence. For some reason, his mind buzzed with memories, images of his old marriage, the night at the club, Damon's smirk, the look on Fiona's face in the courthouse. He settled on the couch, letting the swirl of thoughts wash over him. A restlessness prickled his skin. Something inside urged him to finally confront the full brunt of his pain and forgiveness. The therapist he'd seen years ago had suggested that real healing might mean acknowledging the good parts of what had been lost, not just the betrayal. Reaching for a dusty photo album in the side table, Andrew flipped it open. He hadn't touched it in ages. Inside were pictures from better times, his wedding with Fiona, honeymoon snapshots in a beachy paradise. In one photo, they looked genuinely happy, arms around each other, eyes bright with love. A pang gripped him, a reminder that it hadn't always been lies and resentment. He thought about how easily resentment had masked the bittersweet memories. Now, older and calmer, he could see that the real tragedy was how much potential had been squandered. His phone buzzed, startling him. It was ironically Harriet, sending a group text about an old friend's wedding. He ignored it, focusing on the album. As the sun began to rise, Andrew noticed a subtle shift within himself. Yes, Fiona had shattered his trust, but the years of fury had receded, leaving space for something else, perhaps acceptance, maybe even forgiveness. Not the kind that welcomed her back into his life, but the kind that let him say, "I release you from my anger." Standing, he carried the album to a box of old keepsakes. One by one, he filed away each photo with deliberate care. He refused to burn or tear them. They were part of his history, a piece that helped shape who he was now, someone stronger, more discerning, but also capable of empathy. Later that day, Andrew visited Dr. Melanie Brooks again, scheduling a quick check-in. Sitting in the softly lit therapy room, he recounted the morning's reflections. "Doctor." Brooks nodded, offering a calm smile. "It's natural to grieve the good memories alongside the painful ones," she said. "Forgiveness isn't about dismissing what happened. It's acknowledging the hurt and deciding it no longer controls your life." Andrew felt tears prick at his eyes. "So if I can appreciate that Fiona and I once loved each other, that doesn't mean I condone how it ended." "Exactly," Dr. Brooks replied. "That's a healthier place to be. It allows you to hold on to what was good without letting the betrayal consume you." Leaving the session, Andrew felt lighter, as though an invisible chain had snapped. The next morning, he shared a slice of that emotional breakthrough with Elizabeth over breakfast. They sat by the window, sunlight illuminating their table. "It's weird," Andrew mused. "I used to think letting go of anger would be letting Fiona off the hook. But I see now it's letting me off the hook, freeing me from negative energy." Elizabeth reached across the table, lacing her fingers through his. "I'm really proud of you, and I can see it in the way you talk about the past, less bitterness, more acceptance." Her supportive gaze emboldened Andrew to mention another update. Harriet had texted about how she and Ethan were finalizing a separation. Andrew felt a twinge of sadness, but also recognized it wasn't his burden. "It's like everything from that old circle is unraveling," he said quietly. Elizabeth gave a small nod. "Sometimes that's the outcome of deception. You can't save them, but you can learn from their mistakes." That evening, Andrew stepped onto his back porch, sipping a mug of tea. The setting sun painted the sky in peach and lavender hues. He allowed himself a moment to reflect on the big picture. Damon facing justice, Fiona scraping by, Harriet's marriage collapsing. Meanwhile, Andrew had built a fulfilling life with Elizabeth, forging deeper connections with James and a sense of professional pride. He recognized that the ultimate revenge wasn't about seeing others suffer, it was living well, free of bitterness. The final step was letting go fully, even if that meant acknowledging the heartbreak once shared. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and quietly said, "I forgive you, Fiona," to the empty sky, not expecting any cosmic shift, but feeling an internal peace settle over him. When he re-entered the house, Elizabeth greeted him with a tender kiss on the cheek. "You look at peace," she murmured. Andrew smiled softly. "I think I am." And in that still moment, with the last rays of sunlight filtering through the windows, Andrew felt a gentle resolution wash away the final echoes of betrayal. A year later, the Maplewood property Andrew and Elizabeth had eyed was now their home, a spacious two-story, with a yard full of tall oaks and a wide porch perfect for lazy summer evenings. The couple had poured love into renovating it. Elizabeth chose warm paint colors and modern fixtures, while Andrew focused on a functional home office for those occasional days he worked remotely. Now, he stood on that wraparound porch, sipping iced tea and watching the sky fade into twilight. Inside, Elizabeth was preparing a family gathering, nothing huge, just James, a few close friends, and maybe a neighbor or two. The smell of grilled chicken wafted from the backyard. A sense of profound contentment anchored Andrew's heart. At times, he still glimpsed headlines about Damon's ongoing legal battles or heard rumors that Fiona had drifted from one meager job to another. Yet these tidbits no longer stirred a storm in him. He wished them no harm, but he no longer carried the burden of their choices. The hush of the evening carried more meaning than any leftover anger could. Soon, Elizabeth joined him on the porch, sliding an arm around his waist. "The marinade's a hit," she teased. "James practically ate half the batch." Andrew laughed softly. "I'm guessing he's starving after working all day." He leaned in, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Everything feels good tonight, doesn't it?" She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Sure does. Hard to believe how much has changed from a few years ago." They lingered there, watching the sky shift to indigo, then returned inside where James was pouring drinks while chatting with a couple of mutual friends. The atmosphere was warm, lit by gentle laughter and clinking glasses. Harriet wasn't there. Andrew had decided to keep that chapter closed, but he didn't dwell on it. People moved in and out of our lives for reasons we might never fully understand. James pulled Andrew aside at one point, handing him a cold beer. "Hey, want to see a magic trick?" he joked, tapping the bottle with a flourish. "Watch me make this vanish in 10 seconds. Andrew chuckled, raising his own drink in a mock toast. "To new beginnings," he said, voice quiet but sincere. James nodded, mirroring the sentiment. "To new beginnings indeed, my friend." As the evening unwound, Andrew found himself fielding playful questions about children. Elizabeth blushed, admitting they were open to the possibility soon. Andrew felt a flutter in his chest, excitement tinged with nerves. The idea of fatherhood once terrified him, especially after the betrayal that nearly derailed his life. But now, standing in a home built on genuine love and trust, he felt steady enough to consider it. Toward the end of the night, the guests trickled out, leaving James and Elizabeth tidying up stray cups and plates while Andrew finished storing leftovers. The three of them shared a final round of conversation in the kitchen, the overhead lights casting cozy shadows. "You sure you're ready for fatherhood eventually?" James teased, a grin on his face. "Babies are a whole new adventure." Andrew smirked, meeting Elizabeth's soft gaze. "I've faced bigger storms, and I won't be doing it alone." Elizabeth took Andrew's hand, giving James a playful nudge. "He's right. We can handle a little chaos." After James left, Andrew walked him to the door. Before stepping out, James turned, an unspoken warmth in his expression. "I'm proud of you, Andrew, for real. The Andrew I saw 4 or 5 years ago, he was buried in rage. You've grown." Andrew felt a rush of gratitude. Couldn't have done it without good friends. Thanks. James departed, leaving Andrew to close the door and secure the locks. In the quiet aftermath, Andrew found Elizabeth in the living room, gathering blankets and pillows. She turned to him with an affectionate smile. "Crazy how normal everything feels, huh?" she said gently, eyes glinting under the soft lamp. "But I love it." Andrew set down the items he was carrying, moving closer. "Me too. Even on the busiest days. It's a good normal." They settled onto the couch. Elizabeth leaned her head on his shoulder, and Andrew breathed in the comforting scent of her floral shampoo. Outside, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves in their yard, nature's lullaby to a tranquil home. He closed his eyes, letting the sense of gratitude fill him. His mind flickered across images of the past, Fiona's betrayal, Damon's downfall, Harriet's guilt, and all the heartbreak that once ruled his life. Then he opened his eyes to the present moment, Elizabeth's warm presence, the soft glow of their home, the promise of a future not shackled by bitterness. A tender peace settled in his chest, far deeper than mere relief. It was acceptance and love, forged from hardship and redeemed by growth. His phone buzzed with a low vibration. He picked it up to see a text from an unknown number, quickly scanning the preview. Possibly more spam or maybe Harriet. Without a second thought, he powered the screen off. He didn't need distractions. Right now, he had everything that mattered within arm's reach. Elizabeth smiled, noticing the phone's darkened screen. "No more calls tonight?" Andrew shook his head. "No more calls, just us." She nestled closer, her contented sigh mirroring his own. Outside, the moon crept above the treetops, bathing the yard in pale light. In Andrew's heart, there was a quiet acceptance that whatever shadows once haunted him had receded, replaced by the simple joy of forging a new chapter. He kissed the top of Elizabeth's head, blinking back the faint sting of happy tears. Within that still moment, as the hush of night wrapped around them, Andrew felt the full bloom of peace. He silently thanked the path that led him here, no matter how jagged it had been. The final cord of resentment had dissolved, leaving behind only hope, gratitude, and a future ripe with possibility. Elizabeth and Andrew together would face whatever life brought, anchored by trust and mutual respect. They lingered like that for a long time, letting the soft hum of the house cradle them in the kind of serenity Andrew once feared was impossible. The betrayal that started it all had found its bitter end, but so had the anger. Love, warmth, and genuine forgiveness had taken root instead. And as Andrew gazed around at the cozy living room, he felt certain that he'd discovered a peace worth all the tears and struggles.